The second game in the U20 World Cup is against France, and when I say that this match is crazy, then I really mean it. So with that, let's waste no time and dive right into it. Starting off this game, we see the lineup for the match against France and Japan. Here we can see that the mysterious new Gen 11 Hugo is playing as a center midfielder and more of a defensive one. And for Blue Lock, they are going ahead with the same lineup that they used in the last half against Nigeria, which as long as Chigiri is in, I'm happy with, but it's a bit of a rogue play. The text then says, it's time for round 3 of the U20 World Cup's Group A. It's almost time for the kickoff between Japan and France. After that, we see the commentators, and starting with Teriyasa, who asks Natsuki what kind of team the U20 France team actually is. Natsuki has a huge grin on himself as he says that, to put it simply, they're the favorite to win, explaining that their national team is the reigning World Cup champion. And the U20 team led by Loki are called the Golden Generation, who'll secure France's future for the next 10 years. Teriyasa says that he understands and continues by saying that, and challenging that mighty team is Japan. Blue Lock's members have caused an absolute sensation, and they dominated Nigeria 4-0 in round 1, and we see the crowd being absolutely ecstatic as this is happening. Anyway, they continue and says that finally, Isagi is fast becoming a symbol of this generation. Right now, the soccer team with the most attention is Blue Lock Japan and the Egoist team, and today they're sporting their fresh white alternate uniforms. And while on that topic, just look at those uniforms. I'm not gonna lie, but they are way more sick than what they are usually wearing. After that, they are obviously walking out and walking side by side. To Isagi's side is Loki, who looks over at Isagi and tells him that they meet again and calls him an egotist. Isagi looks at him with a determined face as he tells him hello and calls him Wonderkind. After that, we see Charles looking around and around, but he is quickly confused, and he then asks if Shidu isn't starting today either. Bachira looks super wholesome as he says that he's on the bench. Charles then gives him a pretty strange face while telling him that if that's the case, then he guesses that they are going to wipe the floor with them, and he then says a demon emoji like that wild guy usually does. Bachira hits him back, but I have no idea what is coming out of his mouth. Anyway, after that, Rin walks by, and he tells Charles to just keep running his mouth and calls him a contrarian, and he continues as he tells him to get ready for a broken nose. Charles makes some sort of mocking facial expression behind Rin before telling him that the same goes to him and calls him beastie. After that, we get to Isagi, who is having to try and look at Loki, who's jumping up and down like he's in a bouncy castle. But Isagi thinks that whoever wins will get as close as possible to the finals, telling himself to convert this pressure into defiance. With that, both of them look at each other fiercely, and the text says that the match between the highly anticipated teams in the group league, Japan versus France, kicks off, which it sure does, as Loki passes the ball to none other than Hugo, who looks super depressed and dead inside as he tells them to get ready. A bit off topic, but in this game, I hope that we learn a bit more about the no-names since they looked pretty cool. Anyway, back to the topic, where we see Hugo telling them to zoom and zoom. They do as they all rush upwards on the field with no sign of slowing down. Isagi looks extremely confused, but it's far from him, as it's also Bachira and Karasu, who both can't believe what is going on. Loki then seems to be sprinting behind Isagi, as all of the French team are fully focused on sprinting into enemy territory. After that, Hugo says nice, and he then starts to move with the ball, and it's something with the way that he dashes that looks so insanely cool. Anyway, he tries to go past Isagi, which, well, doesn't seem to be much of a trouble, but Rin then comes and tries to do something. But that's when Hugo puts his hand out, and is able to shove him all the way out of reach. This makes Rin get visibly annoyed as he really looks angry. We then get to Isagi, who's just lost, and who can't believe anything that is going down, as he is just left thinking that Hugo managed to dribble right past him. After that, he screams out to all of the Blue Lock players, and he tells them all not to let Hugo pass. We then move on to Hiyori, who looks extremely locked in, and he says that he already knows that, but he thinks that there are too many danger spots to protect, and he calls it utterly impossible, as we understandably sees as the France team has countless of their players pretty decently free. Hugo's eye then looks like it does something interesting, but it's hard to say anyway. He says beep 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 and focus, which yeah man, don't ask me what that guy has been smoking on to say that out of the blue. But with his saying out of the way, he fires off an insane pass, and this panel is kinda hard to see, so I'm not sure if this is a nutmeg on Rio, but I don't think so, but it might be. We then move back to Isagi, who looks absolutely blown away as he says that Hugo is passing right up on the field and towards none other than Loki. But just then, as Loki is running with all that he can, he suddenly gets hit by the triple block. Aiku, who is in front of him, asks Loki if the pass isn't for him, and he continues with a slight smirk, saying that anyone else is just the bait. Nico adds on by saying that it's as clear as day, and Ryu tells him that they won't let him style through, and Heike, that sounded pretty cool. But we then move back to Loki, who surprisingly he doesn't look fazed by this in the slightest, as he just simply calls it too bad, and tells the contrarian to come on, and that leaves all three of the Blue Lock defenders pretty shocked. But we later see that the ball that was headed to Loki, it got intercepted by Charles, and he has a huge grin on himself as he says that he is sneaking in. Aiku's eyes gets huge as he is starting to question everything, and he says that Loki rushed in to lure their attention while he crossed behind, saying that the pinpoint pass turned into a nasty, unexpected gremlin shot. And bro, what is with this aura? Because this is on another level. It feels like I've been glazing this chapter so much, but the gremlin aura has to legit be top 3, because it's so insane. Anyway, Charles obviously shoots the ball, and Isagi is looking at it like there's no tomorrow, as he thinks that their teamwork is unreal, and says that their very first attack transcended their thinking, and that Blue Lock's entire system got crushed, and he finally realized that this is the true power of France, and why they are the favorite to win, and with that the ball goes into the goal with ease. So sadly the goat Gagamaru was unable to do his miracles this time, and it led to France getting the first goal. We then move to Loki, who calls it a nice shot. Charles looks like he is on heavy drugs as always, as he says gotcha. And after that Hugo, who is kinda destroying the vibe a bit, says that it's destiny. So we then right away see the aftermath of Charles's goal, and the crowd goes absolutely nuts as they see it. The commentators say that it's a declaration of war, a rapid-fire attack, and a one-shot kill. We also get a small cameo from Ego, who is sitting on the bench looking half dead. The commentators continues as they say that this is a magnificent showing from France with their very first attack, and that Charles Chevalier has seized the initiative. After that, we see Loki kind of trying to aura farm a bit as he simply gives a thumb up to the crowd. Meanwhile, Charles right away runs to Hugo and jumps right onto his back. We then switch sides and go to the better side, which of course is Blue Lock, and Ryu just says, damn, which is kind of a vibe. After that, we see Aiku, who's dragging his hand through his hair and says that France is insane and that they totally fell for their ploy. Nico says that their pattern just now wasn't in the data that they had gathered, and Karasu says that the speed, the cross run, and the shot quality, saying that you can explain it logically, but that goal wouldn't have been possible without incredible skill and talent. Explains that this is the absurd might of their generation's top team, and also Loki's French team, which is, as we already know, the favorite to win. However, after that, someone comes by and claps his hands. We see that it's the chameleon Rio, who tells them all to chill, tells them that France made an experimental surprise attack, and that there were aspects that they couldn't respond to, saying that what France really wants is to rattle them, and in turn, make them throw themselves off their game. Rio looks serious, even though you might not believe it with his panel, but he tells them to cool down their brains and not lose their heads. Aiku goes, fist bumps him, and says that he's right, and calls it nice mental management, calling Rio brain boss. Rio just says that he's got it, and Bachira then bows his head as he thanks Rio for the mental medicine, and Gagamaru also bows his head and agrees with Bachira. After that, we see someone coming by and saying that Rio's right, and that they have just started. It's the GOAT, Isagi, who says that they have planned for when they are a point behind and to just focus on playing their way of soccer. Hiyori looks at him with a smirk and tells him, alright, and calls him an egotist. And Chigiri says that he is right, and also says that they have Isagi, which is kind of cool. Bachira then looks fired up as he thinks that things are just getting started. Isagi tells them that this is good, and after that, he takes a deep breath and tells Blue Lock not to panic. And he also tells himself not to panic, and for both of them to keep on giving their best to secure victory. With that, we see them starting the game back on with Isagi passing to Rin. The commentators ask whether Japan will make a counterattack and say that Isagi and Rin are passing back and forth and charging up the middle, which they sure did, as they even got behind Loki. But just as they were destroying the France team, Charles comes by and tells Rin that he saw that in their first game against Nigeria, he bumped into Rin and tells him that he and Isagi will make their way up and then make it so either of them could be the finisher. Asking if he isn't right, Rin is just a bit shocked to see Charles here, but he doesn't say anything and is just silent. But just then, someone from the France teams who's called Bats comes by and he looks super cool, and Charles tells him to box Rin in, and he has a huge smirk as he says that. However, Rin is just calm and collected as he looks to the side and tells Charles that they have already worked around this, and he passes the ball. Charles looks super surprised and shocked as he can't believe it, before saying that Rin passed to the right side, and he then tells the France team to watch out for the speedster. But come on, this is Chigiri we are talking about, so there's no way that anyone could take this goat down, and he gets to the ball first and says that they can go fast too, and after that, he looks like he means business as he passes a direct cross into the box, or at least close by it. We then see Ryo, who calls it a good tempo and calls Chigiri princess, and with that, he jumps high up into the air and says, "Nice groove." After that, we see someone who I'm pretty sure is called Gabin, but he screams to someone else called Hermes, not let him shoot. We then see the center back from France, who is called Hermes, and he says that this is as expected, but after that we get back to Ryo, who tells Hermes that he has got him as he's starting to go into his copy mode, and this time, he decides to go for Kunigami, which is sick since I'm pretty sure that this is the first time that he has ever copied. Kunigami, Gabin, looks super shocked as he asks about what's going on, and says that he's setting up a shot instead of shooting, and after that we see that the ball went to Isagi. And also, while on this topic, this copy from Ryo is the same head pass that Kunigami did in the PXG game, I'm pretty sure anyway. Isagi then gets a light smirk, as firstly his meta vision eyes come out, and also his pieces start to get active. After that, he tells Ryo that he has a nice groove, but just when everything seemed to go so smoothly, it just had to go downhill, as we see Hugo, who comes right by Isagi and puts his entire arm out right in front of him, and admits that Blue Lock actually has a good team. After that, we see Isagi, who doesn't seem like he can understand what is going on as he looks shocked, but Hugo tries to drag him closer and away from the ball, while telling Isagi that his two-gun volley only works when he's squaring off with an opponent and can feint in either direction, making his shot unpredictable. But if one were to charge him and close that gap, then his movements could be totally nullified. Isagi looks extremely annoyed, but we then see Hugo's dead eyes as they are completely blank, and he tells Isagi that his weapon can be crushed by logic. Isagi looks back in awe and says that Hugo ran a simulation using his movements as data. After that, the ball finally gets over to Isagi, and Isagi tries to do his best to keep it by him. After that, Hugo tells him that the backwards volley that he did during the Nigeria match can also be nullified through contact. But just when Hugo thinks that he's got Isagi where he wants him to, Rin comes by and screams Isagi's name. We also have Karasu by the side, who tells Isagi to pass and that he's free. Isagi then looks super happy as he thanks them, but suddenly, we can see that Karasu and Rin both get blocked by other players, and Hugo then continues his little rant, as he says that if they block his helpers, then he has nowhere to pass to. He continues and says that if they manage to crush Isagi, then Blue Lock is dead in the water. However, hearing Hugo talk that much nonsense and shit about Blue Lock understandably makes Isagi a bit mad as he turns around and tells Hugo to be silent and calls him a logical asshole, telling him that he has made it this far by devouring arrogant creeps like him. Isagi is trying to hold Hugo off as his eyes then starts to burn with aura, and he tells Hugo that he's going to risk it all to be number one. But before Isagi is even able to finish that sentence, Hugo cuts him off, and with a creepy and dark tone, he tells Isagi that he's more suitable to be number two, which is honestly so insanely wild, but also coldly to say. Anyway, Isagi is completely shocked by that, but just then, Hugo goes and just casually steals away the ball from Isagi, and he also asks Isagi if he believes in destiny, and with that, he starts to run away super coldly with the ball. Meanwhile, Isagi looks back towards him, and he looks super pissed off. We see Hugo starting to sprint insanely with the ball, as he in the previous chapter stole it from Isagi, just as in that chapter Hugo asks Isagi if he believes in destiny. Isagi, however, is too focused on the ball, and he doesn't have time to answer Hugo's questions. That's also why Hugo decides to just talk to himself like a crazy person, and says that he will enlighten Isagi, telling him that there's nothing fantastical or spiritual about the logic of destiny. With that said, Hugo fires off a pretty nasty pass towards up on the pitch. It even passes by both Rin and Karasu with no issue at all. The commentators are ecstatic about this, as they scream that this is wild, and that France's Hugo has blasted it right to the front line. It's a counter pass. Karasu looks back at the pass and looks super annoyed as he says that it's heading right to Loki. But then, in the bottom, we see a shoe coming into the panel, and they are saying that this is the spot, asking if that isn't right and calling Loki Wunderkind. And after that we see that it's the GOAT Nico who looks super dope, as he has just stolen the ball from, well, the best under 20 player in the world. After that, Nico gets his eye out of his hair and says that when it was stolen from Isagi, this was the most dangerous spot. Loki looks at him, and actually, it doesn't sound like he is bothered at all, as he just says, well. This is pretty funny though, as it feels like Loki isn't even taking this match seriously, and honestly, he shouldn't as they are currently in the lead. Anyway, Isagi, who saw this, gets hype right away as he screams towards Nico that it was a good job. We then also see Hugo, who says that it wasn't that bad, and praise from Hugo does seem very rare. After that, Nico thinks that he just has to clear the ball, which he does, and clearing the ball basically just means shooting it high up in the pitch. After that, we get into his mastermind where he thinks that when an opponent has a way to keep Isagi from shooting, Blue Lock can change attack patterns, He then looks serious as he takes a deep breath and says that when their calculated team design has been seen through, they will sting them with unpredictable solo skills. And he also tells Bachira, who got the ball, to pierce their defense and calling him Hornet. And you guys already know it, as Bachira does just that as the ball lands at his feet with no problem at all. And then he starts it off with embarrassing bats as he makes an awesome dribble behind him. However, suddenly and shockingly a player goes right in front of him. He says that there he is, which means that he has most likely anticipated Bachira. We then learn that he is called Camus and that he is a right wing. After that, he singles Bachira to go to him, and he tells Bachira to just try him and calls him Little Zephyr, which isn't that kind of cold anyway. Bachira does seem a bit hesitant, but he also seems super excited as he says that it's time to sting. After that, he starts to go at Camus right away, and it does look like he managed to get behind him without any trouble at all. But suddenly Camus puts his hand on Bachira's chest, which makes him freeze. We see that Bachira is really shocked, and he lets out a quick sigh before thinking that Camus matched his dribble tempo and altered his pace to follow, explaining that this is clearly a guy who studied his style so that he could cover him specifically. We see Bachira continuing to try his best to get behind Camus, but he is really struggling. Camus tells him that he is way too predictable and once again calls him Little Zephyr. Bachira just gets a little smirk on himself as he tells Camus to just be silent already and calls him Windbag. After that, we see a furious player running behind him, and Bachira says that in that case, then Chigiri is up as Bachira passes him the ball, which leaves Camus a bit shocked. Chigiri then catches it without any trouble at all, and he says that he is on it. He looks super determined as he says that he will use his speed to break through, but while he is running out of nowhere, another player comes right by him, and it isn't even Loki, as it's someone totally new who asks Chigiri if he is sure. He tells Chigiri that it's not gonna happen, and that there is no way that he will let him through. Chigiri just looks at him totally mind-blown, and he questions to himself how this player can be so insanely fast. After that, we learn that he is called Leiden and is the left wing for France. After that, we move to our poster boy, and the GOAT, Isagi, who currently looks pretty shocked, says that he's fast enough to cover Chigiri during a solo sprint, saying that the same thing happened to him and Bachira. He looks serious as he says that all the tricks up their sleeves have been logically predicted and dealt with by France, explaining that in every aspect, they have the upper hand. After that, mind you guys that this is still mid-game, and Hugo just casually goes and pats Isagi on his back. He tells Isagi destiny, and Isagi is super shocked to just see Hugo chilling and talking to him. Hugo, however, continues and says that destiny comes down to your suitability. He looks serious as he always does, and he says that physique, personality, and talent, these things determine your basic abilities the moment you're born into this world, saying that, in other words, from the moment they're born, people aren't equal, which yeah, sucks to hear, but it is kind of true, unfortunately. However, Hugo is far from his conclusion, so he continues and says that each being has a suitable way of life, explaining that horses can run fast, birds can fly, and creatures just need to live in accordance with nature. Only humans are unnatural. By the way, I just want to remind you guys that Chigiri is legit fighting for his life while this is going down. Anyway, Hugo explains that humans chase after unattainable dreams, create pointless conflict and despair, and inflate their egos far past reality. Someone without aptitude can never defeat someone who has it. He looks at Isagi intensely and says that it doesn't mean that you shouldn't dream, but it means not dream beyond yourself. He says that if you saw a lion trying to fly, anyone would think it was foolish, explaining that it's better to just live naturally, and if everyone were to live in accordance with their suitability, the whole world would be happier and more efficient. It just means to follow your destiny at the cellular level, telling Isagi that this is his philosophy. With that, he starts to look super manic and intense as he says that it's the suitable destiny theory. Isagi, however, is so fed up with Hugo's bullshit and all of that, and he looks back at Hugo super angry and tells him so what. He has his meta vision out and ready as he tells Hugo that he says that Isagi doesn't have the talent to be a strike, or that his specs make him more suitable to be a midfielder, telling him straight up that all of that is painfully obvious to him already. Hugo then looks at him and asks him, then why does he persist in living so unsuitably? With that, Chigiri also sends the ball towards Isagi, and Isagi gets the ball and passes it forward while telling Hugo that Blue Lock taught him that you can rewrite your destiny with your ego, which firstly just goes so insanely hard. But this pass as well, it just looks super cold with Isagi's puzzle pieces flying around everywhere. However, you might be wonder who the ball is going to. Well, we see a emo-looking player who tells Isagi to leave it to him, and it's of course Rin who gets the ball, and he looks super fired up as he says that he is going to obliterate them and their destiny. Loki then dashes in front of him and tells him that destiny isn't something so easily changed, and he has a smile on himself. With that, we get back into the game where we spot a super fired up and ready Rin, whose aura is just going wild around him as he is running with the ball. Up in front of him, it's Loki, who just has a smile on himself, which I always find super funny, as it just feels like he isn't taking it seriously in the slightest. Anyway, we see the ball down on the pitch, but then suddenly it goes right in between Loki's legs, making a nutmeg. By the way, this nutmeg that Rin did looks awfully similar to what Sei did to Rin in the U20 match, and also their flashback, which is a nice touch. But honestly, Rin is really on fire now. And while I would like to continue and say that he goes on and scores, it's not that simple yet, as Loki looks behind him, and then he stomps his foot down into the ground before taking off, and then in the next panel, he is already right by Rin, and is battling with him, still having that cheeky grin on himself, showing that this is basically just kindergarten football for him. Rin, however, isn't smiling in the slightest, as he genuinely looks mad, which rightfully so. But he then kind of stops and slaps away Loki's hand, and they go into this really sick-looking stand, off where the air pressure from the two of them even started to send waves. Anyway, Loki right here actually looks a bit lost, but that's when we can see that Rin has spotted a hole in their defense, and there is a line towards the goal. Rin is, of course, able to see it extremely clearly, and he right away gets himself into shooting position and starts to pull his leg back. But Loki is just as fast on it as he locks in, and he has lightning coming from his eyes as he starts to advance towards Rin. Loki is able to somewhat catch up to Rin, and he puts his hand on him to get his center of gravity a bit unbalanced. But even with that, Rin doesn't stop there, as he still gets away with the shot. The shot is actually looking super good until Hugo comes right by and decides to put a stop to the fun, as he makes some sort of karate move as he jumps up into the sky and is able to deflect the ball using his heel. And he has a stone-cold facial expression as he does that, and looks right into Rin's face. Rin looks back at him, but this time with a super annoyed face, as he just lets out a sigh, as he is able to see the ball going out of bounds. The commentators are loving this though, as we can see them screaming with all that they can, and saying that this was so close. They explain that Hugo's super block keeps France from conceding a goal. The Japan fans are in shambles as they are witnessing this, and they can do nothing but just scream. We then move over to our favorite poster boy, Isagi, who takes a deep breath before he lets out a bit of an awkward laugh. He looks at Hugo, who has just gotten back onto the ground, and he wonders to himself if this is even for real. He wonders if it could be that even that just now was all just predicted. Isagi looks genuinely confused and stunned as he thinks that reading Rin's trait of wanting to shoot while colliding, Loki limited the shot course, and then Hugo came in and blocked it. However, Isagi then remembered that it's not just that, but also that the tactics that Blue Lock prepared, as well as all of their individual abilities, everything has been logically understood and grasped, thinking that talents placed in the right place bring out a 100% performance and an aptitude-based elite collective. After that, it gets super dark around Isagi as he starts to dig deeper into his thoughts and wonders to himself if they can even win against France. Just then, when Isagi is in his deepest despair, Hugo decides to invite himself to this conversation, and he says that Blue Lock actually are pretty strong. He then takes his hand through his hair, trying to be that kind of mysterious anime villain type, as he continues and says that if you take the diligent collective-minded culture of Japanese football and mix it with the individualistic philosophy of everyone aiming to be the world's best striker, and create a hybrid team that takes the best of both the collective and the individual. Hugo then goes over to talk about their coach and explains that he is an excellent individual who has made that experiment a success, but he then starts to look serious, and his eyes goes pitch dark as he tells Isagi that this is as far as it goes. He says that it's 66% talent and 33% environment, and the last 1%, it's of course luck. He tells Isagi that these are the ratios of the elements that decide a match, or at least that's what Hugo personally believes. And then in Blue Lock's case, it's a team that's been barely winning by Isagi pulling in that last % of luck, asking if that isn't true. Isagi just looks super confused and mind-blown, but Hugo says that if they won't let a situation where that luck can happen, then this is the ultimate way to crush Blue Lock. Isagi then looks super annoyed as he tells Hugo to just try it and calls him a big talking jerk. However, he kind of fell right into Hugo's trap as he tells him that this quick irritation and snapping back at him is proof that he was in the right spot. Isagi then looks annoyed as he has just been rage baited by Hugo to confess it, and after that he decides to just stay silent. Hugo then takes his finger and tells him that on top of all that, his team has a serious Isagi dependency. After that we get this super dope looking panel where Isagi is almost chained to Blue Lock, and Hugo explains that the Japanese team is currently growing on the premise of Isagi's endless new ideas. In other words, paradoxically he is not allowed to stop thinking and evolving. He tells Isagi, with a serious tone, that if Isagi stops growing, then the team will ultimately collapse, telling him that the heavy pressure is creating impatience within him, and that makes him play easy to predict and easy to crush. And right, here he is also referring to when Hugo was able to steal the ball from Isagi. Hugo continues to look intensely at Isagi as he tells him that, besides, at the point where he is feeling pressure in situation, he isn't fit to be number one. Hearing this really makes Isagi get into a spiral of destruction, or that's what it looks like, at least as he looks crushed. And Hugo explains that because if he were the number one, then he should be able to joyfully enjoy this moment where he is the center of the world, asking if he isn't right once again. And Hugo does have a lot of merit to what he is saying right here, and with that in the back of our minds, we do know how Isagi has been struggling with the thought of him being number one, and how the burden is lying right on his shoulders. Hugo then points to Loki, and tells Isagi that in that regard, Loki is the perfect fit, saying that he is born with the world's best physical abilities, and never doubting that he will become the world's best striker, continuing to glaze him, and saying that his mind and body are in perfect sync with his aptitude, and that he is a natural-born number one. Hugo isn't done, and far from it, as he reveals that he is going to be the one to produce that, looking right at Isagi and telling him that he is going to see a view that couldn't be reached alone, and that he wants to become the world's number two. And hearing that leaves Isagi actually speechless, which I don't blame him for, because hearing someone say that feels a bit weird. But Hugo tells Isagi that him out of all people should understand. Hugo then starts to burn with aura, as he says that he doesn't mean second place, but that he is instead talking about overseeing and manipulating the organization from the second highest spot, being the one who understands the number one better than anyone else. Basically, just an equal being. After this, we get this honestly mind-blowing and insane-looking panel with Hugo's aura going through the roof, and he looks insane as he tells Isagi to come and be the number two. Hearing this, it makes Isagi's whole world start to freeze as he can't believe what it is that he just heard. Hugo continues to stare him down and tells him that if he lives out his destiny as the number two, then Blue Lock can still become stronger, but if Isagi keeps chasing the dream of becoming the world's number one striker, then Blue Lock will be destroyed. With that, we see Bachira, who is taking the corner kick, and this I'm super excited for as it feels like it has been so long, or if this might even be the first corner kick we have seen. This was something that I wished that they would do more of. However, we then see Loki and Rin both still being at each other's neck. Meanwhile, Karasu is looking super serious and ready to do something big. Meanwhile, Isagi is looking super angry and furious due to what Hugo just said. However, under him we can see Hugo, who looks right at Isagi, and he once again tells him that if you keep striving to be the world's best striker, then it will lead to Blue Lock being annihilated here, which is a huge aura thing to just throw out and say. But anyway, we see Bachira's aura starts to flare up, but we also see Isagi's metavision mode getting active and ready as he in his head tells Hugo to just be silent, and if he thinks that he can outwit them, then just go ahead and try. Just then, while the players are rushing around in the box area, Bachira gets a smirk as he doesn't do a simple cross in, no of course, not, as he instead leaves everyone shocked, as he instead does a side pass, which leaves Charles a bit puzzled and questioning what he is up to. After that, we get to the France goalkeeper, who is called Renoir, who, just to remind you guys, he was trash in the Neo-Egoist League games. But anyway, he tells them that it's not a simple cross, but instead saying that it's a short corner, which I'm so glad that he said, because otherwise the France players would have had no idea. Anyway, the ball sent by Bachira goes to the sadist Hiyori, who gets it right by his feet, and he looks fired up as he tells them to run the signal play. With that, both Rin and Isagi starts to get active and trying to break free from everyone. We then move back to Renoir, who screams that they are up to something, and for them all to cover their marks. Just then, however, Loki decides to ignore that and leaves his mark, which in this case is Rin, and he dashes right to Hiyori at insane speed. However, is it too late? Maybe because Hiyori is already going into a crossing position. But we then see that Loki did manage to get there in time, but it was just the small little detail that he was absolutely tricked by Hiyori, who, instead of crossing it, drags the ball to his right and tells him that he was too late, which is super cold to say to the fastest character in the series, by the way. Anyway, we then see Hiyori almost lobbing the ball behind Loki and towards Bachira, who had snuck up behind Loki. Bachira gets it and looks super fired up as he says totes, which, yeah, I have no clue what that bro is on sometimes. We then move back to Renoir, who, it's actually insane how he has gotten more screen time than some of the Blue Lock players in this match anyway. We move into his head as he says that it's Bachira again. He looks at the incoming monster closely and notes that he is right by the line, but that he won't let him make a close-up shot, which is kind of a respect moment since Renoir is showing us that he is standing on straight business. However, as Bachira just gets closer to him, He then gets that face expression, like that he is up to something, as he then says that this, when he does something cool, and something cool, it sure is, as he passes the ball to his right, instead of trying to do something by himself. Renoir right away looks where the ball is heading, and he is also kind of shocked that Bachira decided to go for a pass away from the goal. But just then we see that the ball was going to the chameleon Rio, who compliments Bachira's pass as he says that he is wide open. But after that, he can feel a grubby and huge hand going across his chest, and it's none other than Hugo, who we need a cool nickname for fast. But anyway, he asks Rio if he really is wide open, as he has him kind of grabbed. After that, Hugo's eyes start to spin like some sort of vortex, as he tells Rio that there is no shooting for him and calls him a copy machine. Rio, right in an instant, looks super crushed, like their whole plan has fallen into shambles. But then, after tricking Hugo for a little while, he gets a super huge grin as he laughs and asks him what he means by shooting, and that it's not even the plan. After that, we see that Rio made a pretend shot at the ground and let the ball go past him all the way back to someone else. Renoir is quickly looking at it intensely, as he wonders just why Rio decided to ignore the ball. Hugo also looks back in a second, and someone asks him if he wasn't going to crush him with logic. After that, we see that it's Isagi who is going right to the ball and calls Hugo a second best bastard. With that, we also see his puzzle pieces going absolutely wild all around him. We then get a close-up of his face where he looks super ready and he says that this is his, but suddenly someone comes crashing right into his body and tells him that it isn't his just yet. Isagi is super shocked and caught off guard, but after that, we learn that it's Charles who tells him that the contrarians are here, and he looks so sick. We then see Isagi looking back at Charles and letting out a sort of sigh towards him. After that, Charles decides that it's his time to start and yap, so he says that whenever Blue Lock uses a pattern that they don't know, they keep a close watch on the most annoying spot. By that, he means where Isagi is, explaining to Isagi that that's his job. Isagi is really shocked by all of this, as in his head he says that there is no way, and that they ruined their first signal play. However, just then, we can see that not all the hope is lost just yet, as right by Isagi, we spot Rin, who calls out to him and tells him to pass it. Looks super fierce and serious as he tells him to come over here. But as he looks at Rin, he thinks about Hugo's words as he told Isagi that if he embraces his destiny as second best, then Blue Lock can get even stronger. Just then, we move back to Isagi, who looks super manic, and something we haven't seen him like for a while, as he then tells Hugo in his head to just keep his mouth shut, and that he is going to live as number one. And with that, he sends away the ball even with Charles trying his best to stop him. We even see Charles who looks super shocked by this. Under this we can see Rin, who looks absolutely furious at Isagi. Meanwhile, we see Karasu for a quick second, whose eyes are glued onto the ball, and Bachira, who is just the same as Karasu. However, he encourages the ball and tells it to go. We then see the ball going past two of the PXG players and heading right towards the goal. But then somehow, as I'm lost for words, we see Renoir, who legit catches the ball in the last second with both his hands. Renoir looks super dope, as he explains that this is the only place that it could have gone. By him, we see Isagi, who looks to be frozen in shock by all of this. The commentators are also just lost for words, as they, with all that they can, scream that he stopped it. We also see the Japanese crowd being super mad and frustrated by this. After that, we move to Isagi, who is just trying to process it. But while doing it, Hugo walks by and tells him if he doesn't see it, telling him that without his two-gun volley or his direct shot, he is below an average striker, which is an insane thing and just an insane blow to Isagi. He continues as he tells Isagi that, at this rate, Blue Lock will lose because of him. Isagi then finally looks back at Hugo, who straight up tells him that it's time to wake up, explaining to him that he as well can change. After that, he starts to aura farm like crazy as he puts his hand out to Isagi, and his aura is through the roof as he tells him to know his place and obey his destiny, which sounds so crazy. We also have Loki right by him, who has lightning in his eyes, which is super dope. We then move to Isagi, who has no idea what to say, as he just looks stunned. Under him, it's his best buddy Bachira, who thinks that there is no way. Under Bachira, it's Hiyori, who wonders to himself what they are going to do now. We then have Rin, who lets out a little annoyance sound towards Isagi, and we also have Ego under him. However, it seems like the thing that is going through all of their heads is that they can no longer use Isagi. However, someone who I doubt is sharing that thought is Karasu, who we can see is starting to fire up, and he looks super ready as he says, suitability and destiny. We then get to his eyes, which looks insane. Like, I don't know if we have ever seen Karasu look this dope, but he then says, the world's best second best. And this is crazy because there is so many ways he could be interpreting it. We get right back into it, where we see Renoir, who previously stopped Isagi's shot, and he now is holding the ball in his hand, getting ready to throw it out. We see Ryu, who looks at this and says that this is bad. Aiku also comments, but is a bit more serious as he screams out to everyone that he's making a long throw counter. And because of that, he instructs all of the Blue Lock players to move back. We then move to Rio, who seems to see something else as he screams to everyone that they need to watch out for Loki, and we then see Loki sprinting with everything that he can in the next panel, and not long after Renoir actually throws the ball towards him, and we see him dashing behind both Ryu and Rin in a nanosecond. We then move to Henri on the bench, and she gets up and looks to be super worried as she screams Ego's name. She tells him that they keep anticipating their actions and explains that nothing is working anymore. She then faces Ego and asks him if he has a plan in mind already and if they should swap out their players. However, to our surprise, we see Ego just intensely watching the pitch while saying nothing at all. After that, the ball goes right to Loki, who traps it, and he gets a serious look on his face as he then goes one gear up and makes an awesome sprint forward, which leaves Hiyori right in the dust. But then we see the future number 1 of Blue Lock and the best player ever, Chigiri, who tells Loki to wait up and calls him a speed freak, which sounds a bit rich coming from Chigiri, but since he is the GOAT, we overlook it. Anyway, we then see him grabbing a hold of Loki and trying to have a speed face-off with him. They run side by side, and Chigiri seems to be doing pretty decently against him, as he in his head says that he won't let Loki run free. They keep their pace battle, but then Chigiri notices something crucial, and he says that Loki isn't just fast, but that he is also pushing right through him, and that makes him start to grind his teeth out of frustration. After that, he thinks that Loki is going to be able to get past him, but just then something shocking happens as Karasu comes in and sweeps away the ball from Loki, which leaves Loki looking super confused. Chigiri, on the other hand, looks to be ecstatic as he tells Karasu, "Good job," and Karasu gets ready with the ball as he tells him likewise and calls him Princess. After that, we get into his huge and outstanding brain as he thinks that thanks to Chigiri racing him, Karasu was able to parse Loki's dribble rhythm and managed to cut in just before him. We then spot him looking super focused as he takes a deep breath before looking ahead on the pitch and wondering to himself just what he should do now. He thinks that he should assume that they can't rely on Isagi anymore, and hearing that it's just something that I still can't really believe. We then see Charles, who looks with big eyes towards Karasu, and he looks super ready as he further confirms it by telling him to come on. We also see a quick panel of Hugo just eyeing him down a bit. With all of that in mind, Karasu starts to look serious and a bit worried as he thinks to himself that at this rate they will just keep reading and slowly crush them. With that in mind, he knows that he can't just sit there and wait, and knows that he has to act on his own, which is something that he does as he starts to run forward and just check out that aura around him like that's insane. Anyway, we then move all the way to the useless Isagi. Before you Isagi Glazers attack me, I'm also an Isagi Glazer, so calm down anyway. Isagi thinks back to Hugo telling him to know his place and to obey his destiny. Isagi then curses Hugo out because, due to him saying that he has sadly realized the harsh truth, which is nothing shorter than that his abilities just aren't effective anymore, we then see him starting to get more and more furious as his puzzle pieces start to wither away into thin air as he thinks about Hugo's second saying and that he should live as the second best. Isagi then decides to take a moment and look around on the pitch, and he says that if he stops worrying about scoring his own goals and focuses on helping the team win, then they could probably evolve. He looks towards Hugo and admits that it might be the best way for them to defeat France, who is currently the king of the soccer world, but he then starts to think deeper about it and questions if that would really be the way of Blue Lock, which we of course know that it wouldn't, and with that in mind, he starts to run on the pitch, and he screams towards Karasu that he is free over here. Isagi continues as he thinks that he is going to be the world's best striker, and that the ego of his will never waver, and we then see him looking extremely fired up as he tells Karasu with a burning desire that he will make it happen. Karasu sees him but just calls him a dumbass, which to be honest is pretty funny. But anyway, he tells him that acting on a whim isn't going to work against this France team. He sees Isagi coming closer to him and thinks that if they keep on relying on him, then Blue Lock is going to die right here, which is kind of harsh, but it is true. With that in mind though, he starts to use his eyes and look around as he then tells himself to think of something and that they have to change. After that, we get this, not even joking, but at least top 5 manga panels of the entire manga as we spot Karasu being completely devoured and looking like a real crow as he has wings and claws and everything. Like truly this is just phenomenal, like At first glance, I could have sworn that this was Da Vinci's doing, but it's just the Blue Lock authors cooking, like there's no tomorrow anyway. While Karasu is aura farming, he is actually thinking about something serious and not just trying to look cool, as he says that for Blue Lock's sake, he will change. Which guys, do you just hear that? Like Karasu is truly a real team player. Now am I glazing him so much mainly because of this outstanding panel? And to that I would just say that, of course I am, because how could I not? Anyway, we then see his eyes, which is filled with a blank slate and kind of aura, as he says that he will become the second best, which was just what Hugo was going on about, but instead for Isagi, anyway. Moving back to Karasu, who currently is the flashiest man in the game. As him alongside his new crow wings, he makes a really sick-looking dribble behind the France player Bats. Hugo sees this, and he looks to be visibly shocked by that. Under him, we also have Charles, who just like Hugo is having trouble getting what is happening. To Charles's right, it's Isagi, who looks to be the most shocked out of all of them, as he thinks that Karasu used him as bait to dribble past. He then thinks about it some more, and wonders if Karasu is really thinking about going to score on his own. After that, he says that they didn't practice a pattern like this, and I still don't get why he is so worried about following their previous plan, since he knows very well how that hasn't been working, and it feels like letting them play of instinct and vibes would be the best, and it's usually those times where they get their new awakenings. Anyway. Isagi then looks towards Karasu intensely, and he sees his eyes, which are almost burning up with aura, and he wonders just what it is that Karasu is thinking. After that, we move to Charles, who is super confused, and he tells Karasu that his whole vibe has changed. We then see the goalkeeper, Renoir, again, and he calls out to the team that Blue Lock is once again on the attack, and tells them to be ready and to watch out for a shot. However, we then leave him and head to Karasu, who is running with the ball, and he thinks to himself that he isn't going to shoot. And he is far from it actually, as he then calls him a moron as he explains that he has to stop thinking of himself as a striker. His crow feathers are going around him, and he thinks that he needs to erase all needless information, and as he looks out to the pitch, he realizes that he needs to use himself as second best, and then from that devise a new plan. We then see the panel at the bottom, where his eyes are once again going into this new kind of like emotionless and blank state, as he says that he is going to make them win, since he is now in control. He looks at Isagi, Chigiri and Rin, however, as he sees them, and more importantly, where they are currently positioned. He says that they are no good at all. With that in mind, he knows that he has to do something differently, so he then decides to almost end us with yet another amazing panel where he puts out his arm, which isn't even an arm anymore, as it's a whole claw, which looks insane, like whatever the authors are currently smoking on. I'm gonna have to get some of it. Anyway, moving on from that, Karasu says that right now, the one most suitable for a goal is an extraordinary striker, which that saying is just sick as well. But yeah, Karasu then gets away with a pass up on the pitch, and it goes past both Rin and Bachira, and both of them looks at it pretty shocked. However, we then see Karasu, who looks intensely and super serious as he says that he needs someone. Now who is that Karasu could possibly be needing in this intense moment? Well, it's none other than the goat Hiyori, who traps it flawlessly. Karasu's eyes start to burn the exact minute that Hiyori traps the ball, and he tells him to let's go, and calls him a major sadist. We then see that Hiyori's eyes have also started to glow just like Karasu's, and he tells him, Roger that, and calls him a frenemy, and that is just so cold as well, where we see Hiyori, who has gotten the ball to his feet by Karasu. The text says that he sent it over to the left side and that the ball goes to Hiyori. After that, we get a close-up panel of his face where he starts to look pretty locked in, but moving under it, we can see his meta-vision eyes beginning to sneak out and get fired up as he thinks that he was thinking the same thing as Karasu just now. He continues and thinks that the attack patterns that start with Isagi are dead in the water. We then see Hiyori almost flying up on the pitch as he looks extremely fast, and Karasu keeps a close watch on him. Back to Hiyori, who says that somebody's got to create a new pattern, and right now, in this intense and unpredictable moment, they are the only ones who can manage to do it. We then see Renoir screaming out that Hiyori is free and asks his team to go and cover him right away. We then see someone who I doubt even has a name yet, but he tells Renoir that he is on it. However, it turns out that he is just pretty trash as Hiyori deals with him, like if he were just air as he calls him too slow as he cuts past. After that, he starts to look towards the goal while thinking that he needs to aim for a shot. But just then, two of the France players magically teleport right in front of him, and they are here to set a stop to the furious Hiyori. But as that happens, we see him, and after that with a dark tone, he just says no, and that he doesn't have a course yet. That's why he decides to pass to Karasu, who is just coming to his side. The France players seem to be in shock as they say that Hiyori is doing another side pass. Hiyori, on the other hand, thinks that this is great. he looks super serious as he explains that this threw off their defensive line, and then, in his head, he tells Karasu to just go ahead and shoot the ball now. We then move over to the crow himself, who traps the ball, and he already has a player right on his tail, which he is already battling with, but we then see him looking super mad, but to our surprise, it's not due to the France player being right on him, but instead, because Hiyori passed him. Karasu calls him a dumbass and asks him why he didn't shoot it himself, and calls him this time a major sadist. After that, we see some flashbacks to their time in the youth team together, and Karasu thinks that he knows that his talent as a striker is best of all, due to them, well, obviously being on the same youth team, explaining that Hiyori's conflicted feelings about soccer and his resignation and how much he changed here in Blue Lock, as he says that last part. We also see a ton of moments from the Neo Egoist League, and most of them from the Ubers match from the looks of it, where he decided to go his own path and become a full-on playmaker. Anyhow, our favorite crow of all time, he continues his speech and says that he has been watching him all along, and that's why he should know, as he says that we spot Karasu passing the ball back to Hiyori with a super dope looking pass, if I can say so myself. Anyway, Hiyori right off the bat gets visibly shocked by that, as he thinks that Karasu passed the ball back to him and also says his name. Karasu then thinks that with all of the things that he has already said in mind, this is why he can take this chance on him, because of his extraordinary shooting talent, which honestly, everyone should have their own Karasu who believes in themselves. Moving on, we see Hiyori, who now has the ball, but just then, both Rin and Isagi come running on his side, and both of them scream towards Hiyori, telling Hiyori to pass the ball. This makes Hiyori stall for a second, but it ends just as fast as the Karasu comes right by him, and he thinks that the idea came to him once he put everything into being the second best. Just then, he tells Hiyori with a very gritty, dark, and serious tone to just shoot the ball already. He continues and says that the path to victory lies in self-sacrifice. Just then, I kid you not, Karasu turns into a straight-up demon-looking creature as he looks insane, like you can just see his eyeballs slightly glowing out from his face. By the way, while this is going on, Karasu is acting like a tank or something, as he himself is holding back two of the French players, and how this man does it, like, I have no idea at all. After that, Karasu once again speaks up and tells Hiyori, or not even telling him, as it's more like he demands him to aim for his head. And just that as well, telling someone to aim for your own head is actually crazy. However, Hiyori just sees this as a win-win situation, as either he scores, or he will just hit Karasu right in his head, so his eyes start to burn up, as he says that he is trusting him, and calls him extraordinary. And with that out of the way, Hiyori decides to waste no time at all, as he sends the ball right at Karasu's head, which luckily, Karasu manages to dodge as he lowers his own head. But come on guys, once again, what is this for magically an outstanding panel, like Karasu legit has huge wings on his back? This surely has to be illegal, like, where is the referee? Anyway, we then see Gabin, who is like super confused about what is going on, as he explains that Karasu lowered his head at the last second to create a tiny shot course. We then move over to the crazy boy Charles, who is super caught off guard as he asks who the hell it was that said that they couldn't make goals without Isagi, and I guess that it was France's game plan all along to just shut down Isagi and then win. However, Blue Lock is much more than just that, even though Isagi still is the GOAT after all. We obviously also see Renoir trying his best to save the goal, but I'm guessing that his beginner's luck is over as he fails to stop the ball and it goes right into the back of the net, almost making a whole hole in the net due to sheer force of it. We then see the spectators being ecstatic over this as they scream out, and we then move over to the commentators as they scream goal over and over. We then see Hiyori and Karasu celebrating together, and Hiyori looks super happy. Meanwhile, Karasu is trying to stay nonchalant and aura farm. However, it looks like he is actually holding out his arms like an actual crow, which is cool. The commentators then continues as they say that with Hiyori and Karasu's trick shot, Blue Lock has tied the scores, which is such a good thing to hear. We then see Chigiri and Bachira being also super glad over this, as they scream and heads over to the two of them in an instant. We then see Isagi, who looks super in amazement as he breathes super heavily, before saying, alright, he thinks that they caught up, and that they now have a chance. But suddenly, his eyes starts to look confused or maybe more shocked, as while he looks at all of them, celebrating he wonders what it was that Karasu just did now, saying that it looked like he'd totally given up on scoring his own goal. We then get a close-up to his eyes, as he starts to question if that is really okay, and if that doesn't go against everything that Blue Lock stands for, and he does have a real point in that. Just then, when Isagi's mind is a bit scattered, Hugo comes by and asks him if he sees, telling Isagi that even if it's not him, there's someone with the brains and talent to be second best. He then takes his hand like always, trying to really become the mysterious anime villain. But no matter how much he tries, he can never be the Goat Kaiser. Anyway, he continues and says that it's not bad, Blue Lock, saying that this is the destructive power of utter suitability. We then see Isagi, who just sighs at him, but Hugo doesn't even seem to acknowledge that, as he keeps on going and tells Isagi that there is one more thing. If he also started acting like a second best up on the front line, then Blue Lock could hold its own against France, and hear me out. That sounds so insane. Hugo doesn't stop there, as he tells Isagi that he holds the team's destiny in his hands, and that's a real burden. And we can clearly see that on Isagi's face as he starts to look super confused about what to do, as he just stands silent. But just then, when that happens, someone actually goes to grab his head, and that makes Isagi pull a really funny face. The player tells Isagi to just ignore him, explaining that their destiny is to devour each other to be the best. We then see that Rin isn't holding back at all, as he is really pulling Isagi's hair back while telling him that second best is so tepid, and honestly, I'm so on board with Rin, and I couldn't agree more. However, Isagi looks super, I don't even know the right word, but I guess like he's questioning everything, as he wonders to himself which way is the right way. We then get to the bench where we see Henri, who is super happy as she calls out to Ego, and tells him that they did it. She tells him that Karasu and Hiyori managed to create a new attack pattern, and that they still have a shot. Ego, however, is just silent before he tells Henri a straight-up no. He then starts to look intense, as he says that he didn't expect this, and that he had no desire for this chemical reaction, and that's why Ego is the GOAT. Like, he is so cool. Henri, on the other hand, has no idea what he means as she just looks at him, confused. We then move back to Rin and Isagi, where Rin lets Isagi's hair go, and Isagi is left by himself, and he starts to wonder about just what he should believe in. After that, we see Karasu, Hiyori, Rin, Hugo, and Ego all behind him. Meanwhile, he turns into a really dark shadow as he questions just what it is that is happening in Blue Lock. We then get to the commentators, who say that Blue Lock Japan has caught up, explaining that this white-hot match is just getting started. Now, while that is going on, and everyone seems to be super happy, Isagi seems to be a bit concerned over all of this, as he looks confused and lost. He wonders to himself just what it is that is happening in Blue Lock right now, wondering about where this team is trying to go. After that, he stands in the middle of the pitch completely alone, and it gets silent around him, as he can just question what it is that he should believe in. He looks over to Ego, who it looks like is looking towards Isagi himself, and Isagi says his name. Just then, Karasu comes by and calls out to Isagi, which sends Isagi back into reality real quick. Karasu looks super sweet as he puts out his hand and tells Isagi that they should keep on using this method. Now Isagi is just at a loss for words as he says that, but Karasu says that they are covering him too heavily, so the plans that they practiced aren't going to work. He continues and says that he is going to focus on helping to set up shots like what he just did now. Then his sweet expression turns into a much more serious one, as he explains that he will figure out new ways to score goals without Isagi, telling him that it's the only way that they can possibly beat France, and asking if he isn't right. Isagi looks at him, still a bit lost, as he just says, sure. However, it isn't there that everything ends, as Isagi really locks himself into the conversation, as he asks Karasu if he is okay with throwing away his life as a striker. Hearing that seems to leave Karasu in awe this time around, as he firstly looks to be confused as he just asks Isagi what he means, saying that it isn't like he is throwing it away. Karasu goes deeper into it as he says that he knows for a fact that Isagi has done the same thing before, explaining that he does stuff like temporarily assist to help set them up to win. Isagi looks at him straight ahead and tells him that it's true and that he has done it before. Karasu then tells him that it's just the same thing that he himself did now, saying that if he wants to talk about life as a striker, then what about Gagamaru, who is currently playing goalkeeper, or all the guys playing defense, saying that none of them are strikers? Isagi right here is struggling to come up with a comeback to Karasu's argument, and says that it's just something about his new attitude that doesn't sit right with him. This makes Karasu extremely kind of disrespected as he asks him what he means, saying that he can't just go and diss him if he can't even verbalize it. After that, he gets this awesome looking panel where he has an aura coming right off him with a bunch of feathers around him. He stands up with a phenomenal posture as he tells Isagi that, unlike what he is doing, at least he is trying to change for Blue Lock's sake. Hearing that sentence makes something tick in Isagi's brain, as it finally looks like he came up with something. After that, he tells Karasu to hold up, telling him that it's just that which has been bugging him. Karasu looks back and asks him what he means. Isagi then explains that he just said that he is doing it for Blue Lock's sake, anything besides playing soccer for themselves, telling him that this isn't the way of the egotist. We then see a small panel at the bottom where we have Karasu's eye, and it looks like he got super annoyed. We also see Hiyori, Bachira, and Chigiri looking over there as they start to wonder what it is that is going on, as they most likely started to overhear their conversation. Isagi then continues with his speech, as he says that all of them are aiming to be the world's best striker, explaining that Karasu deviated from that philosophy because of what Hugo said. Isagi then puts his hand on his chest and looks so insanely dope as he says that now he is prioritizing the team's victory as a second best, ending it by telling him that it's not the Blue Lock way. That whole speech makes Karasu look super angry and outright pissed off as it gets dark around him, and he tells him to then go on and score a goal, calling Isagi trash, which now I don't want to pick sides, but it's a bit unnecessary, I will admit. And honestly, I feel like Isagi agrees, as he is super caught off guard by that, as he doesn't even understand what he means with it. Karasu then is the one who gets into a deep speech, as he says that since he isn't effective as a striker, he is trying to change based on their opponent's opinion, asking Isagi what it is about that. He takes a deep breath as he asks him if it would be the Blue Lock way to let France kick their asses just for Isagi's sake. It then looks like Karasu's eyes really get lit with some sort of insane determination as he looks straight at Isagi deep into his eyes and tells him that it looks to him that the one spinning his wheels and acting like number one and trying to ruin Blue Lock is Isagi himself, also ending it by calling him an ordinary person, which, yeah, is not necessary at all, to be honest. Anyway, Isagi heard it, and it makes his entire world get flipped upside down as it gets blank in his mind. After that, he completely locks in, and he gets super close to Karasu as he screams right in his face that he is thinking about Blue Lock as well. Isagi screams so hard and gets so angry that his face veins even start to pop out, and he looks furious as he tells Karasu that he is working so hard and that he has been racking his brain about what he needs to do as the best in Blue Lock, continuing and about to talk more about Blue Lock. But Karasu then cuts him off and tells him that he just said it himself. Isagi just said that he did it for Blue Lock, and with that, he asks Isagi how in the world he is any different from him, and that makes Isagi get a real reality check, it looks like, as he doesn't know what to say anymore. But luckily, the captain of the team, Aiku, then arrives just in time as he breaks it up and puts his hand on Isagi's head and shakes it around a bit. He tells them that it's enough and tells both of them to just chill out. He starts to smile as he looks at them and explains that they are both right and asks what if they are trying to think about it all in another way, saying that there's no denying that Karasu's method got results and the egotistic philosophy Isagi's talking about is important too, so let's make use of both. He puts both of his hands together and says that they will fight with all that they have got while finding a new shape for Blue Lock to win. He then starts to smirk and gets a bit of a devious smile as he asks them how it sounds. Isagi sounds a bit hesitant, but he says sure, and Karasu says that it's fine by him, as he says that in any case it seems like it's time for Blue Lock to change. And as he says that, we can spot Ego sitting and chilling on the bench, and I wonder so extremely much about what is going through his mind at this exact point. We then move on to the France team, and Charles says that they caught up to them, and he says that it's super annoying by them. Loki adds onto the conversation as he says that he himself thinks that it will be more fun than shutting them out. Hugo, the dead-looking guy, adds on that he is on Loki's side, and that it sounds good, explaining that he will keep leading this field towards its destiny. And with that, the restart of the match is on, as Hugo passes the ball over to Loki on the side who catches it right away. Loki already has a steam of aura coming off his body, but to try and stop him, it's Rin who looks like he's about to enter his beast mode, and I believe that it can be his time to shine soon. Anyway, he tells Loki to just try it and calls him a perfectionist freak, telling Loki that he wants a goal so badly that he can't stand it anymore. With that, we see that the matchup between the two of them is beginning, and Loki responds to Rin's trash talk by telling him that he is the exact same and that he is also dying for a goal. We then get over to Isagi, who is currently in his own head. He thinks that they have settled on their strategy for now, but that they haven't solved the fundamental issue yet. We then get a close-up right to his face as he continues his inner monologue and says that the goal that Karasu and Hiyori made will be hard to use now that France is ready for it, explaining that its reproducibility is too low. He looks at the current battle between Loki and Rin and says that nothing will change unless he can make himself effective, but there's no way in hell that he will live as the second best. Just then, Hugo creeps up right behind Isagi, and he is actually like right in him. Almost, he goes right to his ear and slightly whispers to Isagi that second best is just another kind of ego. Isagi is just in total awe, wondering why this creep is almost right by his face. He then looks to his side, where they catch each other's faces, and Hugo tells him that being the best isn't the only way to live. Isagi, however, can't even start to begin to wonder about what it is that Hugo is telling him, as he instead has to act quickly, so he gets some distance and slaps away Hugo's hand. Hugo then continues and tells him to listen up. He says that he will tell him about his ego as second best, and now that scene before was super weird, but I can't sit here and lie and say that the line just now wasn't super cold. Anyway, Isagi seems to be pretty confused and pissed off by Hugo's actions, which I really can't blame him for. He tells Isagi that he will explain to him about his ego as the second best, and Isagi just looks at him, while looking pretty annoyed at him. We then see a quick panel from the Loki and Rin duel, where Loki obviously was too afraid to face Rin, so he decided to chicken out and pass the ball towards Hugo, who traps it so sick, like always, and he then starts his lecture as he tells Isagi that he bets that he believes that the second best means someone who couldn't manage to become the best, asking Isagi if he isn't right. However, even though he asked him, he still doesn't give him any time to answer, as he then puts out his hand and tells him that it's not it at all, and Isagi just looks super confused as it sounds like Hugo is just yapping to himself. We then cut to a panel of ego, and Hugo tells Isagi that they have just been brainwashed by that bowl, cut 4 eyes to believe that they have to be the best, which I mean, that isn't something that you can argue with as that's true, but is it really a bad thing though? Anyway, we then get back to Isagi, who looks super furious and mad as he tells Hugo to just be silent, and that he doesn't want to hear about his biased opinions anyway. But Hugo hits back with a serious blow as he tells Isagi that he is the one that is actually biased. As Hugo is playing around with the ball, he continues and says Isagi's name, and asks if he haven't ever looked at others and felt that they were wasting their talents. And just as Hugo said that, we can clearly see that it finally ticked inside Isagi's brain, as he, in an instant, thinks to Baru, Yukimiya, and Hiyori, who he has previously felt were wasting their potential and talent. We then see Hugo's eyes close up, and he looks serious as he tells Isagi that it has been like that for him for as long as he can remember. With that, we spot a younger-looking version of Hugo, where he is wondering why everyone is so ignorant of themselves, thinking that they want to do things they can't, and yearning for things outside their reach. And he explains that it really drives him crazy. We then move up to a slightly older Hugo, who is standing around in a field of gears, as he explains that when he sees humans failing because their talents and self-image are unaligned, it makes him want to correct their mechanisms, saying that he was naturally gifted with that sensitivity, and that it's something that he just can't seem to help at all. After that, we see him going up one gear, as he actually destroys Isagi with one of the coldest nutmegs ever. Like, this was serious for him. Anyway, as he did that, he explained that it's why whenever he meets people, he tells them that things will go better if you do this, or if you try this, then you can beat him. Another example is him telling someone that if you do this, then you will be more popular, and lastly, if you do this, then you will even become more loved. By the way, I just want to mention that while he was yapping a bunch, the nutmeg under Isagi was a pass towards Charles, just so that everyone is following. After that, we move over to Isagi, who every time we see him just looks angrier and angrier, as it looks like he wants to rip Hugo to pieces, while saying that it's all creepy as hell, and he calls him a self-centered meddling jerk. Hugo looks back at Isagi, and their eyes meet, as Hugo tells him that he is exactly right, explaining that he is just doing what he wants, so he doesn't mind if Isagi hates him, as he isn't doing it out of charity or out of spite. Continuing and saying that it's just that when his ideas cause someone to live more suitably, the world begins to turn anew. While he says that, we also see Charles, who gives back the ball to Hugo, and Hugo then does an insane trap with his chest as he jumps up and meets with the ball. It then gets dark around him, and he looks a bit more serious as he says that when people meet him, then their destinies change, and producing people like that is utterly fascinating. And guys, hear me out, from what Hugo is saying, I do really get him. I'm not going to lie here. Isagi then looks back at Hugo, and just then, he realizes something huge as he thinks to himself that Hugo might actually be kind of like himself. Isagi then thinks back to his conversation with Onatsi, and how Isagi pretty much said the same thing, and also changed Onatsi's destiny. We then get back to Hugo, who says that it makes life worth living, telling Isagi that he wants to learn why he was born, and why Hugo is actually making me such a huge fan of him in this chapter, like he is spitting these bars like he was some Greek philosopher. Like, honestly, just keep on cooking, bro. Anyway, he isn't just cooking with what he says, but also on the field, as we see him going up one gear as he begins to get away from Isagi. Ryo sees this, and looks decently annoyed as he says that Hugo broke free from Isagi. Aiku, who is also eyeing this down, screams out in a nanosecond and tells everyone to watch for a pass. Lastly, we have the analytical crow, Karasu, who tells Aiku that he is already watching and calls him a dumbass. We then once again move back to Hugo, who, while running at top speed, says that his talent is suitable for changing others to make the world turn. So he has never once wanted to be a striker, but with that said, he wants to win the World Cup as the second best and as a midfielder. We then see Isagi on the side, who is doing everything in his power to try and get a bit closer to Hugo, and just try to destroy the gap between them. But while he is stressing, Hugo looks to be calmer than ever, as he asks Isagi if he knew that the world record for most times winning the World Cup is 3 times, explaining that Pele, the king of soccer, is the only one to hold that record. It's off topic right now, but I just love when the series mentions real-life players. I just think that it's so awesome. Anyway, back into the game where we see Loki, who is starting to smirk as he is in front of Hugo and tells him to just come on. But if Loki wasn't trouble enough, then Charles also appears behind Aiku and says that there's no way and that Hugo is going to pass over to him instead of Loki. But we then coldly get a close-up to Hugo's eye, which we can see is in the shape of a spinning gear, and that's sick, as it means that Hugo has an original metavision design, or that might be too much to say now, but that's what I believe and what it most likely is. Hugo then speaks up and says that it's exactly why he will win the World Cup 4 times, and that his ego is insane, just casually saying that he will win one of the hardest trophies to win in football, 4 times in a row, and we can see that his body has the ability to match that ego as he starts to emanate a bunch of spinning gears around him as he really locks in. Isagi just looks towards him in total disbelief. Meanwhile, Hugo then fires off not a pass, but instead a shot towards the goal, while saying that he will become one of humanity's legends. And the shot from Hugo goes right past both Charles and Loki, but also Aiku and Karasu, who can't do anything. Karasu even looks back in pure awe as he thinks that all the pass courses his teammates created were just decoys. We then see Gagamaru, who starts to jump towards the ball, while he himself was also surprised that Hugo was the one who took the shot. We then get a close-up panel to Isagi once again, as he is just in awe, as he thinks that Hugo's dream is huge, and that it's not about being the best or the second best. We then see the ball going past Gagamaru sadly, and right into the back of the net, which gives France their second goal of the match, and also the lead currently, which the France spectators seem to love as they scream out in pure happiness. Isagi, who is still just breathing heavily, thinks that his dream is more grandiose than him. He looks at Hugo and thinks that he is sharper than what he is, and his ego is even bigger than his own. And that last part is what shocked me the most, as we have found someone who can out-ego Isagi, and that's completely insane. After that, we first see that the first half is over since the referee blew his thing, which I forget what it's called in English, my bad. But after that, we see one of the most insane and mind-blowing panels we have ever gotten, as Hugo is legit half human and half some sort of machine here, as he then asks Isagi if he still hates the idea of the second best, which I'll admit and say that if I were Isagi, then I might even fold here, because after seeing Hugo score a goal like that, I would just be in total disbelief and shocked to my core. We then, however, move on to the bench where we see Hugo, who tells someone to get ready and that they are starting in the second half, and he then calls them his double jokers, and we then learn that it's both Baru and Shidu, which is completely insane, as we haven't seen these guys since the Neo-Egoist League, which feels like it has been ages. Also, just look at them. They look completely filled with bloodlust and pure fire in their eyes, as they are going to get ready to get out and wreak havoc. However, having them on the field at the same time is what leaves me really in awe, as it's just insane, and I can't see them working well together. However, if they somehow manage to work it out, then I will be blown away. We see that the first half between Japan and France is over, and that we are now in Blue Lock Japan's locker room, where we can see everyone taking a breather and thinking about what has just happened. We first off head over to Aiku, who starts to smile as he says that he can see why France is #1 in the world, but he doesn't stop just there, as he then goes even further and says that Hugo sure is nuts, which Aiku is spot on about. We then move to Bachira, who is drinking his water bottle, and he looks so wholesome as he then says that they are just 1 ahead, explaining that if they can fix their strategy in the second half, then they can still win. As Bachira says that, Rio joins in on the conversation as he asks Bachira just how they are supposed to do that, saying that all of their attacking patterns that started with Isagi are right now dead in the water. Bachira then looks right at him and says that still, they built this team around Isagi. Rio counters right away as he says that it's exactly why they are failing. Bachira, however, is just like me, a ride or die for Isagi, so he tells Rio that they can still make it work. Rio then starts to get just a tiny bit annoyed as he tells Bachira that at this rate, they are just going to get their asses kicked and lose. While that is going on, we actually spot Isagi chilling, just watching this go down while he is staying silent. But not long after that, Karasu speaks up and tells them all to just chill out. He explains that they can make up new patterns like Hiyori's goal. We then get a close-up of his face as he says that he will be this team's second best instead of Isagi, and that they should just run with this new strategy. And look, I like Karasu, but trying to replace Isagi as the center of the team? Calm down, lil bro. Anyway, just then, Ego comes out and tells Karasu to watch what he says. Karasu is super confused and caught off guard. Meanwhile, Ego just asks him if he is trying to kill Blue Lock, and he has a deadly stare as he says that, which makes both Karasu and Isagi look right at him. He continues to walk alongside Henri as he explains that he does, in fact, applaud his quick-witted play change. But the problem is his mindset, saying that partway through the first half, it looked like he had given up on his own goals, asking Karasu what that was about. Karasu doesn't know what to say right off the bat, and is silent before saying that he thought that it would be the best for the team. But hearing that just makes Ego a bit mad, as he tells Karasu that he thought that he had already told him that those who fight for the team are worthless trash, and Karasu doesn't respond with anything. Instead, he lets Ego go on this yapping rant as he takes his hand across his face and says that if every soccer player tried to play in line with their suitability, then in the end, it would be nothing but a competition of physical abilities and tactics. Ego doesn't stop there, as the Yap King continues and says that France is a multi-ethnic country with a broadly welcoming culture. The variety of talents produced there leads to a diversity of soccer techniques and makes it easier for suitable talents for every position to be born. Ego says that if France assembles an outstanding team of players hand-picked for their suitable talents, Ego then asks them if they think that Japan has any chance of winning even if they do the same thing. He then doesn't even give them any chance to answer, as he just tells them that the answer is no. He explains that telling people to live suitably or to be happy with their position in life is how the strong get the weak to stop thinking so they can control their possibilities. We then cut to a small panel of Ego's eyes, which look manic as he says that they are weak, and if they lived suitably, they could never change the world. He tells all of them that it's exactly why he told them all to be strikers, and that this philosophy of going beyond suitability is the heart of Blue Lock. He then puts his finger against his head while looking around at everyone and tells them to imagine that they could live 100 times. He asks them how many of those times they could become the world's best strikers. If he were to make an incredibly optimistic and miraculously high evaluation, then he would say that it would only be possible one time out of those 100. He then starts to look genuinely scary as he says that an egoist lives for that one chance that never would have happened if they'd known their place. We then cut to Isagi, and we can see that he is starting to get fired up as his aura is quickly coming back out. But just then, Karasu speaks up and tells Ego that still he can't deny that their current approach isn't working. Ego then grabs his iPad and says that he is right, and that if you want something new, then first you need to let go of something old. He then looks closely at them as he says that they are dropping Isagi's centered strategy, and that here's the formation that they will use to fight back in the second half. And as he says that, we can see Isagi, Rin, Hiyori, and Karasu all looking hopefully towards Ego. However, sadly, we don't learn anything more right away, as we instead go right to the France locker room, where we see the players chilling, and after that, we see the French team coach, who is called Rodin. He speaks up and says that they are the strongest generation. They are gods, once-in-a-century chosen ones. They won't just change France's history. This incredible collection of talent will change all of soccer forever. He then tries to look cool and aura farm, but he could never be like the GOAT, Ego. But he ends it by telling them all that they are France's Les Bleus and that they should go and make history. We then see all of the no-name characters get super excited by that, while Loki, Charles, and Hugo couldn't care any less at all. After that, we are still staying on the France side as we see them starting to walk out, and Loki calls out to Charles. He tells Charles to give him more line-breaking passes this half. Charles is just a bit shocked and asks him what he means, pretty much. Loki, who we can see is stretching a bit, says that if this ends without him scoring, then the earth will be sad, asking if he isn't right. Charles just tries to rage bait him a bit as he asks Loki if he feels frustrated, but after that he has a huge smirk on his face as he says, "Alright," and that he will give him some nasty ones. And this just screams foreshadowing for an insane Charles and Loki goal in this half. But after that, we see Hugo, who goes and puts his arms around Loki and Charles, and I never realized how huge Hugo really is, but he is massively. Anyway, he tells Loki that it's okay and that he doubts that this match will end like this. Both Charles and Loki seems to be a bit confused to what it is that Hugo is meaning, But he then looks right at them and tells them that it will get messy. And after that, all three of them looks out to the pitch. And Hugo says that it seems that Blue Lock has chosen that destiny, which honestly is the only good one. But we then get to what it is that Hugo is referring to, and we spot Kunigami, Baru, and Shido, all having entered the pitch and is getting ready to give it their absolute all. Shido is the first to speak as he starts to look manic as he says that his cells are screaming. Baru looks insanely cool as he is fixing his wristbands with his mouth and says that it's time to hunt. And we then have Kunigami, who also looks pretty dope, but still a bit emo, as he then tells them to quit drooling and calls them beasts. After that, we see the formation, and we see that Rin is in the middle, and Shido and Baru are on the wings. We also see that Kunigami got placed down in the midfield alongside Isagi and Karasu. We then cut to the players that was benched, and we see Bachira looking sad, as he says that they have been dismissed. Nico also adds in by saying that there is no use crying about it, and while they are somewhat down, we then have Chigiri on the side encouraging Kunigami. And once again, their friendship might be the best thing to ever happen to the story, as I just love it. Anyway, we then see Isagi being alone on the pitch, and he thinks that they are going for an all-out offense formation. He looks more ready than ever, as he thinks that the strategy centered around him was obliterated. He then looks right at Hugo, who is before him, and he thinks that there's someone clearly more talented and a bigger dreamer than him standing right here. This is the worst possible situation. But still, Isagi closes his eyes as he starts to wonder why he starts to feel so excited about all of this. He tells himself to surpass Hugo, and that it's what his ego is screaming at him to do. And with that, we see both Isagi's and Hugo's eyes starting to flare up like crazy as they are burning a ton. Also with that, the commentator screams that it's time for the second half kickoff. And just like that, it was back on. We see the commentators being super ecstatic over the game being back on, as one of them tells the players to go, and the other one explains that the non-stop intensity of Japan versus France charges into the second half. With that, to absolutely no one's surprise, we see the game being back in full action with France, of course, leading with 1 goal, but Blue Lock starting with the ball, as Isagi seems to be passing Karasu on his left. Karasu gets the ball, but it doesn't stay with him for like even a second, as he sends it right away with a super cool pass. Now under him, we see that it's Shido who the pass is going to, and Shido lets out a music note emoji because, why wouldn't he? Anyway, Shido is holding away one of the defenders, and that's why just as he gets the ball, he, just like Karasu, sends it away. This time the ball from Shido is going at full force to Ryo. Now I'm sure that you have already guessed it, but the ball doesn't stay with Ryo either for very long, as he sends a super straight pass to Karasu, who does have 2 players around him and guarding him like hawks, but obviously it's Karasu, so he locks in and gets out his feather aura, and then he dashes right in between the players. With them out of the way, he gets out his metavision eyes and says that this half, they are striking back, and that line goes so insanely cold, so big ups to Karasu. We then see some of the French players' reactions as we see Charles, who just smirks as he says that it's interesting. We also have Loki, who explains that they changed their entire strategy. Hugo agrees and says that it's now a complete change from before, saying that it's a triangle passing pattern with Karasu as the crux, and this panel also goes wild with Karasu, Ryo, and Shido passing each other, for then the crow to just fly over them in line with the ball. The ball then reaches Shido once again, and this time Charles is in front of him, but instead of reminiscing about the past that they share, Shido just screams die right in Charles's face because that's not rude at all. With that, he also sends a pass over to his left side, where we can see that the ball landed in the hands of Hiyori. Hiyori traps it flawlessly before he as well gets his meta vision eyes out and tells Blue Lock to move, and that saying from Hiyori really worked as we then see Karasu, Ryo, and Shido, all of them looking almost possessed as they go rushing towards the French goal. Charles is super confused by this, as he says that they are all rushing, which he wasn't ready for. The French goalkeeper, who for some reason just keeps on getting more and more screen time, is getting even more screen time than the GOAT Corona has gotten. Anyway, he says that this is it. He holds his hand out and says that the crux isn't just Karasu, but that he and Hiyori are using a double game maker system. With that, we see Hiyori firing off an insane pass towards Karasu. We then move into the sadist's little head as he thinks that Karasu is bringing the ball up and he is changing the pace as they are attacking up front with their combined ideas that leave Isagi free behind them. And this panel is genuinely so insane cool as we see Isagi getting the pass from Hiyori instead of Karasu. And from the last few chapters, I thought that he would be sidelined, but seeing him once again in the spotlight makes me so happy. Isagi, who now has a ton of puzzle pieces just floating around him like crazy, tells Karasu, "Nice skip," since Karasu skipped over the ball and let it flow over to Isagi. However, after that, the Day Destroyer comes by, and it's of course Loki, who comes sprinting right in front of Isagi as he tells him that he expected this much, which, firstly, is a credit to Loki since he saw this coming. Anyway, if he thought that he would actually beat Isagi, then that's a whole different story, as we can see in Isagi's eyes as they are getting more and more fired up, not to mention his metavision coming out. He then, in his head, asks Loki what he thinks about this, and just then, he screams out to Rin, who has not appeared right by his side, and he passes him flawlessly. Rin looks super intense and fully locked into the game as he says, "Here comes a surprise combo." With that, Loki obviously has to go and guard Rin instead of Isagi, which in turn does leave Isagi free, and with that in mind, Rin decides to pass to Isagi, making an egotistical 1-2 pass. But sadly, Loki has to come in the way yet again, as he tells them that they are way too slow and tells them that they are still in his range. So with that in mind, he dashes right to Isagi, who now has the ball. In the panel under that one, we can see them going head to head and really battling for the ball. And it does look like Loki is starting to get more ground on Isagi. But with that said, we then move into Isagi's brain, and he also has a ton of puzzle pieces around himself as he thinks that now, for one more surprise connection, he then tells someone he calls for the hungry lion to come on. And with that, we see Isagi, of course, passing the ball to Baru, who looks absolutely manic as he sprints and rushes to the ball with all that he can. After that, we can finally see his furious eyes as he speaks up and announces that it's now time to get nasty, while, of course, having his signature lightning strikers around him. In front of him, he does have two of the French defenders and also the goalkeeper in his way. But is that really enough to stop him? We start off by seeing the GOAT Baru, who goes absolutely wild on the pitch, doing his signature chop feints behind two no-names from the France team. While he does that, he says that Isagi made a royal dribbling path for him, and he will devour it in one shot. This is a really small detail, but I just find it wholesome how he referenced Isagi right here. Anyway, Baru then starts to load up his shot before, in the next chapter, he is about to fire away the ball. However, he ends up just shooting in the air, as Hugo has come out of nowhere and snatched away the ball, kind of mocking Baru a bit with what he is saying as well. Baru then looks right at Hugo, and we can see that this man is pissed, as he is just a bit confused as to what just happened. We then move back to Hugo, who now has the ball right with his feet. He starts to get ready, as he says that he's trying to throw them off with a Karasu-centered frontal offensive, and Isagi and his hand-selected collaborators coming up from behind talk about attack power, which he isn't wrong about, as that is the main thing that Blue Lock for sure has in store. But after that, something awakens in Hugo as his eyes get super sick, looking like a straight beam of pure light, as he says that in that case, they will also give it a try too. With that, we see Loki putting in the speed right away as he starts to run, and Charles throws out a little devil emoji as well. But from the Blue Lock side, we have Rio, who screams and is mad. He tells everyone that this is a forward pass counter, telling the entire team to keep an extra close eye on both Loki and Charles. After that, Hugo sends away his pass, and it goes straight behind Rio. It would have been kind of cool if he had just caught it, but I guess not. The ball instead goes to someone called Layden, and he just starts to laugh in a bit of a weird way. Karasu sees this while he is guarding Loki, and he is super shocked. We also have Isagi who, just like Karasu, is confused as he says that they're working up the side. Anyway, Layden just gets a huge smile as he asks Team Blue Lock if they think that Loki is their only striker. Now, I don't know why this guy is talking so much. Bro really thinks that he is a part of the main players in France, but he can never be Charles, Hugo, or Loki. However, I do have to give him some credit, as when Isagi goes to stop him, he just bursts right behind him, making Isagi look like a straight fool. After getting done over, Isagi looks back and realizes that he has messed up, thinking that they saw that they clustered their defense in the center around Loki and Charles. So Layden is racing up the side where they are short on players. Not to be that guy, but if Chigiri were still in, then he could probably have prevented this. I forgot to say it, but we also see Layden saying that it is beat down time, which to be fair, also sounds kinda cool. We then move over to the bench, where we see Henri being super worried. She says that they instantly devised a counter-strategy for their new tactic and switched to a laser-focused attack pattern. We then see both Hugo and Ego at the same time, almost like they are soulmates, saying that if Blue Lock wants hyper-offense, then it seems like they are also going for hyper-offense, explaining that it looks like they want a no-guard all-out brawl, and just what is going on with this panel. This looks like shit Da Vinci would have drawn back in the day. Anyway, Henri from the bench calls it amazing and says that this is France, the world's #1. We then see the France coach, who is called Rodin, and he tells his team to just impale them. We also see Layden, who starts to look locked in as he starts to laugh. With that, Leiden wastes no time shooting the ball right towards the goal and right behind Ryu. We see Gagamaru eyeing this shot down extremely closely. He wonders if it is a shot like a pass, but he then says that it's perfectly aimed to go in unless he touches it, so he needs to go out for it. However, just then, we see Loki jumping super high into the air while having both Karasu and Aiku behind him, and both look to be barely breathing as they look close to dying. Meanwhile, Loki has a huge smirk on his face as he looks Gagamaru dead in his eyes, and Gagamaru rightfully gets scared as he explains that they got him just now, and the third goal from France was just about to happen if the GOAT Kunigami didn't come in the last second, and instead of Loki, it's him who heads away the ball, legitimately saving the day for Blue Lock when he was just subbed in. That's what I call a hero if I have ever seen one. After that, Kunigami starts to look super determined as he tells France that if it's a brawl that they want, then they can just count him in, and that last line from Kunigami goes so incredibly hard. We start off by seeing Igo's special letter to Kunigami, where Igo told him that the answer lies in battle, telling him to become the ultimate physical combat warrior, and with that, we also see him going wild as he is boxing. We then get back to Igo, who explains that the special training that he gave him focused on honing the sense of spacing needed for combat sports, as well as building the sort of physique that will keep him on his feet in physical collisions. Igo looks intense as he says that those are useful assets for a striker, of course, but they'll be weapons that will make him excel in any position. We then see Henri by his side, who says that it's why Igo swapped in Kunigami as a defensive midfielder in this half. We then see the ball soaring high into the air as Igo continues and says that it's right, telling Henri that by using him at the same time as Shidu and Baru, they made it easy to counterattack since they have so many players on offense. That's exactly why, however, in this match, Kunigami will use his body as a shield to interrupt France's counters, calling him their defensive tank, and with that, we finally see Kunigami, who lands back on the ground, and he looks so insanely cool and he has so much aura. We also see the spectators being super ecstatic over Kunigami as they call out to him and compliment him. With that, we then get back to the ball, which we can see has landed in Ryu's hands, who is right in a battle with Leiden. But even then, Ryu looks super determined as he says that he will keep it going. We then see the commentators, who say that the tables have turned as Blue Lock Japan is making its counterattack. With that, we head over to Isagi, and we also saw Ryu passing the ball over to Hiyori. Anyway, back to Isagi, who is running on the field, and he thinks that Igo's plan is working. He has his Metavision eyes out and ready, as he thinks that Karasu is still the center of their attacks. That will let him focus on moving behind the main formation and striking the enemy's weak spots, explaining that this is a two-sided strategy. Igo devised for them to let them strike back in the second half, and I just have to come in here and say that this is so sick. We then get to Hiyori, who tells Ryo to run as he passes the ball. Ryo gets the ball and traps it flawlessly before telling Hiyori that he can leave it to him. We then get back into Isagi's brain as he says that they are keeping up with France better than the first half, and that it's wearing on their opponents, which we sure can see is true as we see Leiden, who is breathing heavily, and says that this back and forth is rough, but he does have Gabin under him, who tells Leiden to keep sticking to him at all costs. With that, we get back to our main boy, Isagi, who explains that there is still one thing nagging at him, but that will have to wait as we get to Hugo, who comes by and says, "Hello Ryo," and tells him that he won't get away. Ryo looks annoyed just then, and tells Hugo that he has good eyes before calling him butterfly lashes, which honestly goes pretty hard. We then move back to Isagi again, who continues his last thought and says that he still can't visualize how to beat Hugo. He starts to look pretty worried as he says that if he became this team's second best and totally focused on passing, it would get easier to attack. However, he would just be doing what Hugo described and trying to be suitable for the sake of victory. On top of that, he knows that it's the role that Igo doesn't want him to play, saying that if he is going to live as the world's best striker, then he has to find a new theory to beat Hugo with his own goals. And this right here fires me up so much. We finally have the devouring Isagi back in action, as he is hungrier for a goal than ever. But then, out of nowhere, Baru comes by him and tells Isagi that he isn't himself, as Baru can't smell a goal from him at all. Baru looks at Isagi with a disappointed facial expression, as he tells him that according to Igo's orders, the plan was for him to exploit his moves to score goals, but right now, he is just useless, telling Isagi that in this match he isn't the king, and coming from Baru, it's pretty wild hearing that, since he is the king. After Isagi has been lectured by Baru, he looks to be super shocked as he wonders if Baru can instinctively sense how weak his vision of the future is. Just then, Baru starts to sprint away in full force as he says that it's time to find a new prey and that he is guessing that he is on his own to find someone worth devouring, and he looks super intense as he says that. After that, we see a crow in the sky, and with that, we know whose time it is, since we see Karasu standing in the middle of the pitch, and he thinks that he and Isagi are alike. He thinks that they have the same soccer intelligence, and that they came to Blue Lock with the same worries. Just like Isagi, Karasu himself wanted to be a striker, but there was an uncomfortable gap between his dream and the roles he got stuck filling, realizing that these desires don't match his capabilities, and he knows that better than anyone. He is best at manipulating the ball in the midfield and setting up balanced attacks, and he is more suited to be a midfielder. Even so, he couldn't give up the dream of being a striker, which is why he fought so hard to stay in Blue Lock. But still, bit by bit, the gap between him and Isagi has grown, and before he knew it, Isagi was the striker in the spotlight. It pisses Karasu off, but he got stuck in the shadows. He has been wondering, what does Isagi have that he doesn't have? Even if he manages to hang on, when is he going to see the light of day? Karasu continues and thinks that he is grateful to Ego for bringing him to this stage. However, does he even need Ego's philosophy anymore? He can't help wondering that. That's also why Hugo's words struck so deep and made sense to him, as this is Blue Lock's limit with Isagi as number 1. We then get back to the game, where Karasu has his meta-vision eyes out and calls out to Ryo for a pass. Ryo thanks Karasu as he then passes him. Karasu traps the ball and thinks that if he is second best, then he can change Blue Lock. We also see Hugo from the side, who looks at this, and he says that Karasu is really good. Karasu then starts to look super serious, and says that he doesn't think that this method is the complete answer, but for now, it's a choice for the future, where he doesn't have to give up his dream of being the world's best striker. After that, we see Aiku with a smirk, who calls it a nice change-up. We also have Baru, who tells him to just pass him, and of course, his partner in crime. Hiyori, who tells him to go for it and calls him a wandering crow. We then get back to Karasu, who is starting to somehow transform into some sort of crow beast, as he thinks that if he can create a goal here, then he can beat Isagi, thinking that he will turn it all around and then make Blue Lock his own team. With that, he passes the ball right in between a bunch of the French players, and Isagi also sees this and calls it an impeccably timed forward pass. We then also see Karasu again, who has a devious smile as he calls out to Isagi and says that his secret weapon is Shidu, the demon that Isagi can't handle. With that, the ball lands in the hands of Shidu, who gets a huge smile as he says that his egotism is ready to burst, which, yeah, sure, go off. We see Isagi and Karasu at the top, before seeing Shidu, who has an entire demon surrounding him, and Isagi thinks that Karasu is using Shidu as his main weapon. With that, we then see Shidu, who looks freaky like always. He has his tongue out, and says that it's time to blast out this goal load, which bro, he is going too far recently. Someone has to lock this man up. Anyway, we then see Charles from the side as he is right by Isagi. Now Charles starts to just laugh a ton as he says that Shidu is finally here, and he even adds in their little demon emoji at the end. However, that's not all that Charles says, as he also says that he played with him in the Neo-Egoist League, so he knows how he and Karasu make a killer duo, which seems to be spot on so far. After that, we move into Karasu's head as he looks at Shidu, who is going crazy on the field, and he thinks that they have got to score before Hugo gets to them, thinking that, by his analysis, no matter when or where, Shido is strong and fearsome enough to be exactly who he is. We then get a close-up of Shidu, who looks extremely determined, as Karasu then continues and explains that, to put it positively, he's a genius at expressing himself, but to put it negatively, he indiscriminately releases energy to the extent that he ends up influencing those around him. With that, Shidu then sends the ball over to Hiyori, who traps it flawlessly, and Karasu continues with his thoughts as he says that it's why a pairing with Shidu means being changed or opposing him. That's the only communication possible, calling Shidu a demon to test your ego against, and that might be like the best description I have ever heard someone say about Shidu, as that's spot on. After that, we see Isagi rushing up on the field, and he says that he understands, saying that, now that he thinks back, he never imagined having a chemical reaction with Shidu. He looks pretty worried as he wonders if it is because he adapts to opponents too much, before he then throws that thought to the side, and instead says that it must be because he devours them to score. He explains that, unlike him, Karasu keeps an effective distance from whoever he's working with, approaching and moving away as needed to either accept or reject their methods. After that, we see Hiyori sending away the ball to someone as Isagi then continues and says that Karasu is an independent player with a strong sense of balance. His special mindset that can resist Shidu's influence is exactly what their team needs right now. After that, we see that the ball from Hiyori goes straight to Karasu, who, to be honest, traps it super flawlessly. With that, Karasu looks around the field and thinks that making sense of Shido's powerful drives and imagination to work with him is something only he can pull off, since he is more cool-headed than the others. Though it isn't like he loves that part of himself, which sounds pretty depressing and sad at the end of the day. But still, it sounds like it's something that Blue Lock is in current need of right now, so I guess that he has no choice. Anyway, we then see Gabin, one of the French players, saying that Shido is cutting behind them, which he sure is doing as he flies right past Gabin. Honestly, Gabin might have been able to do something if he hadn't just been standing still and yapping, but sure. Anyway, with that we see Karasu, whose eyes are going pretty wild, and he even gets out metavision from the looks of it, and he says, "Beat Isagi" out loud before in his head, thinking that having Shido as his pawn will bring about his regime change. With that, he wastes no time at all as he sends the ball up towards Shido. Shido looks at the incoming ball and starts to look fired up as he says that now it's time to smash it in and calls it a piece of cake. However, sadly for him, it won't be as easy as he thinks it will be, as out of nowhere, Loki with demon-looking eyes appears right on his side as he says that he is well aware that he is bad news, since after all, he was his master in the Neo-Egoist League. Shido just looks at him in total disbelief, wondering how in the world he is here. Karasu shares the same thought as he looks completely lost, as he wonders how he was able to catch up right now. Shido then starts to look possessed, like always, as he asks if it isn't the speed demon Loki. However, he then starts to laugh maniacally as he says that it's still just a 50-50 dead heat. He looks at the incoming ball and says that whoever touches it first is the winner, so will it be either Loki or Shido? Well, I can reveal that it's neither of them, as out of nowhere, Baru comes right behind them, and he jumps up and snatches away the ball by trapping it with his chest, and honestly, this panel with Baru is just amazing. We then see that Baru already has his predator eyes out and ready. He then tells Shido that it's him, the cellular explosion freak. Shido just looks at him in confusion and asks him what he is talking about. However, Baru then continues his dialogue as he says that he is replacing Isagi as Blue Lock's new king, and honestly, I'm surprised that Baru would give away the title of king to someone other than himself, but sure. Anyway, after that, Baru shows us why he is a straight-up beast as he fires away the ball, which of course goes straight into the goal with no issue at all. We then also see Isagi down at the bottom as he looks super shocked as he just says Baru's name, and that he hunted Shido, which sure enough sounds extremely cool, as Baru then also goes to celebrate his well-deserved goal. With that, we then get to the commentators as they scream his name and call it a super goal. They say that stealing a pass to Shido, he fires off a blistering shot to tie the game. Baru has thrown down the counter gauntlet. With that, we see both Aiku and Aryu looking super hyped as they scream out. Meanwhile, under them, we have Isagi, who just looks completely lost. He thinks that Baru gave up on Isagi, who was useless, and then he switched to trying to devour Shido since the hottest part of the field is around Karasu. With that, we see Shido looking straight at Baru as he tells him that his shot was sick just now, but that he is still pissed about it and calls him a hyena. Baru just almost looks down at him as he tells him that if he doesn't like it, then he needs to bite back and calls Shido a cell exploder, and that name just has to stop. Anyway, while the two of them are going off, acting like a married couple, we get back to Isagi, who thinks that as the two jokers devour each other, and the one who tamed them both is the new ruler, Karasu, which is just so much aura, like being the ruler over both Baru and Shido. Karasu then has a smug expression on himself as he tells them good, and to keep it up, saying that it's now his turn in the spotlight. Isagi then gets into his own head as he starts to wonder if the team is stronger than when he was the number one, and if he is losing his place here, explaining that Blue Lock is falling into Karasu's hands, which is just absolutely insane. With that, we then get to France, and we see Rodan calling out to Hugo and Loki. He asks them if they lost here, and if they really think that they can win the World Cup. Hugo tells him that he surely doesn't, but says that Loki just can't score a suitable goal. This annoys Loki pretty understandably, as he then tells Hugo to be silent, and says that it's just Hugo's passes that just suck. After that, the two of them look at each other, really annoyed. Meanwhile, Rodan tells them that he is changing their formation, and that they are making bolder attacks, telling them to show off their guts. We then see Loki telling him yes, and that there is no need to tell him, and Hugo also agrees in no time. With that, we see the match restarting with Hugo having the ball, and the text says that Hugo knows that being born in the same era and the same country and meeting Loki was part of his destiny. With that, we see them playing around with footballs and just chilling. So we start off this chapter by going back all the way to 2 years ago, as we see the French U18 training area, where we see some players alongside Hugo sitting on the field. Hugo tells them that if they were to slip behind their defense at a speed of 20 miles per hour, then with a pass speed of at least 27 feet per second, they could go like this, and this, and this. Just to clarify, he is showing the players what he means with a whiteboard, not just talking telepathically. After that, he looks right at them and asks them if they understand. We then see someone who we can guess to be Gabin, but he says that it's impossible and that there's no way. He scratches his face and asks Hugo if he always thinks this hard about soccer while playing. We then see yet another no-name who asks if this is calculation or intuition, telling Hugo that he is completely nuts. Hugo is just super surprised as he asks if this isn't normal for everyone, but Gabin just laughs and tells him that there's no way, and the other guy tells Hugo that he is out there, telling him to go through it once again because his slow brain couldn't keep up with the goat. After that, Hugo starts to look extremely sad as he finally realizes that he is surrounded by a bunch of mediocre players who couldn't see his vision. The text then says, "Vivian, Hugo is destined. He's seeking what would make him suitable to win the World Cup 4 times. He then looks into his blank book and thinks that first an environment, then a coach and then a team, lastly, a trustworthy relationship where he can thrive as second best. However, it didn't stop there, as he then explains that after that, he just needs a world-class striker, and he then looks at Noah as he thinks that. Hugo explains that Noah is almost 30. Even if they won the World Cup for France, they could only do it once or twice. With that in mind, he knows very well that he needs a new number 1. Vivian Hugo then proceeds undaunted. He still needs to refine the people he needs to achieve his dream. Hugo then tells someone that they are half a second too slow, telling him that he can't become the world's best like that, and asking him if he understands. The player, for some reason, freaks out as he takes Hugo by his shirt and tells him that he isn't his tool and that he doesn't give a damn about his ideals, screaming at Hugo that he is the striker here. Calling him an arrogant and manipulative person, Hugo just keeps on looking right at him as he straight up tells this striker that he is sorry for overestimating him. He is, after all, a disposable middle-grade striker who's more suitable for being around 130th in the world. This is super cold to say, but it does make the player snap a bit as he seems to get furious, as he starts to get ready to punch Hugo right in his face. While that is going on, the text says that Hugo learns that the creatures known as strikers are absolute egotists. But luckily, before this no-name loser can actually punch Hugo, we see Loki, who becomes his knight in shining armor as he slaps away the guy's hand and tells him that he just lacks the talent. That's all. Both that striker and Hugo start to look confused. Meanwhile, Loki just has a big smile on his face as he calls out to the coach and asks him if they could change out all these people. And with that, Hugo has just encountered an unknown life form. After that, we see Loki by the coach. The coach tells everyone that their new player is advancing from a lower level to join this team and tells them all that this is Loki. Loki bows to everyone and starts to apologize for his actions earlier. He then looks up and tells them all that while he is alive, he is going to win the World Cup a few times, telling them to please leave if they can't keep up and ending it by telling them to have fun. Everyone just looks at him, completely lost, as they can't understand what is wrong with him. But Hugo, on the other hand, starts to get super fired up as his gears start to spin uncontrollably as he wonders just who this guy is, with the arrogance, the gallantry, and the absurdity. He looks right at Loki and thinks that this organism is a born number 1. After that, we see just the two of them sitting on the pitch after leaving the no-names. Loki explains that this world sure is cruel, saying that the talentless can never beat the talented, but their free society brutally spurs them on to try anyway. That's the harsh rule of the world. Hugo agrees with him as he tells Loki that, at the end of the day, the talented and talentless can never really understand each other. We then see Hugo kind of being in his own world as he's balancing the ball on his head, as he explains that all he wants to do is win the World Cup 4 times. Loki just looks at him before getting super shocked. He tells him that it's so fire, telling him that he can already tell how serious he is about that. Hugo tells him that he is super locked in on that, and Loki can't help but laugh a ton as he tells Hugo that he has never met anyone with a dream as adorably tyrannical as mine, and the two of them just look at each other then. And Loki can be seen smiling, while Hugo is just his regular stone face. But anyway, with that, we see that the match has restarted and Hugo has the ball. We then see Isagi, who is right in front of him, who looks pretty surprised. He thinks that Loki is moving back and Hugo's going forward. We then see Leiden, who goes on Hugo's side and asks him if they are doing that. We also have Camus, who says cross breeze. which is probably the name of what they are about to do. But with that, we move back to Isagi, who thinks that both wings are closing in on the middle, and he wonders what in the world this unique playstyle even is. Also, just a side note, but this panel is fantastic. We then move on as we see Hugo starting to look super cold as he does some sort of robot sounds before saying that he has found a shortcut. With that, we then see the most insane thing, as it looks like bro is starting to teleport across the field. Like, I don't know whether I'm just high or what this even is. Anyway, under that, we have Rio, who thinks that the other pass courses were just decoys and that Hugo's going on his own. Karasu, however, tells them that he is sure that there's still a pass coming and to keep an eye on the wings. We then head to Kunigami, who thinks that all he's got to do is crush the guy calling the shots, which, to be fair, isn't wrong. Kunigami then goes into a straight-up duel between Hugo and him, but Hugo manages to keep the ball steadily away from him. Hugo then tells them that it's destined, and Loki, who comes from behind him, looks super sick as he tells Hugo that preparations are now completed. We then see Kunigami starting to freak out as he thinks that Loki came all the way from behind, wondering if this is what they were after and that they got them clustered in the midfield so these two could strike from behind. We then see Hugo saying zoom and zoom. Loki does as he runs straight up on the field extremely fast, right to the ball that Hugo has sent over to him. We then see that this attack of theirs is called warp synchronicity. But still, it's far from over, as we have Aiku on the side. Aiku thinks that he can still make it, saying that he just needs to tackle him, even if it means getting a foul. But suddenly Loki starts to run even faster, and Aiku wonders how that's even possible as he is speeding up without looking at the pass. But we then head back to Hugo, who thinks that running at 23 miles per hour with a backspin pass at 28 feet per second, that's the suitability to be the world's best. The text then tells us that Hugo knows the combination of his talent with Loki's is the sort of rarity that comes once every 50 years. We then head to Gagamaru, who is keeping a steady watch at this. He thinks that it's a pinpoint pass to a spot nobody could reach even if they saw it, as Loki runs in tandem at his maximum speed for a joint finisher. But if that wasn't bad enough, then we also see that Loki straight up decides to get Predator eyes out right now, which is sick. We then go back to Gagamaru, who says that the best and second best know what they're doing, but still can't stop them, explaining that this is the pure violence of talent. And after that, we do see Gagamaru trying his best to save the shot, but it's too late as Loki just buries it right into the net. With that, we know that Hugo's dreams of changing soccer history and creating a legend are just happening. With that, France is now leading with 1 goal, and Loki screams out with all that he possibly can. Meanwhile, Isagi is looking at them, and he seems to be pretty jealous. Meanwhile, Hugo just takes one glance at this and calls it good, nothing more or less. We can see Loki celebrating his previous goal. He runs and jumps high up into the air while screaming, "Goal." We see that this is surely getting the French crowd excited, but it's not just them, as the commentator, who I believe is called Natsuki, screams that France retakes the lead, calling it a really crazy goal, and that they are witnessing a supernatural phenomenon, the divine sprinter, Julian Loki. Now I'm not going to lie, but Loki hitting us with this pose is just next level aura. I said in the previous chapter that I was a bit sad that we didn't get a proper goal celebration for his goal, but this sure made up for it because he looks extremely cool with the aura coming off him, and also him just staring into our soul. But anyway, with that, France now has the lead as they have 3 goals compared to Blue Lock's 2 goals. We then move over to the Blue Lockers, where we see Aiku scratching his head. He asks if they are kidding with him, looking pretty mad and annoyed as he questions how they are supposed to stop that. We then have Gagamaru on the side, who breathes out, explaining that it must be a bug and that he's a human cheat code, which isn't even an understatement. We then head over to the chameleon Rio, who looks super mad as he says that they finally caught up, and he slaps them away in an instant. Karasu also just looks ahead and wonders what the hell is with those two. He then watches Loki and Hugo give each other a high five as he questions if they are fighting against aliens. After that, we see the clock, and it's only 15 minutes left in this game, so it's really getting tight. But to the left of the clock, it's Ego, who looks like he is far from giving up, as he has a serious face as he explains that it's time for a change. After that, we see the goat and the ninja, who is jumping up and down while Ego tells him to shake things up. Otoya looks actually super cold as he tells him, alright, and that he will hit them with his aura. Now I'm not even kidding, but guys, do you hear how hard that goes? Like, Otoya is so underrated. We have to see him more. He comes in, drops one line, and I instantly love him. Anyway, after that, we see him changing out with Rio, who pats him on his back and tells him to go out and fight for the last 15 minutes. But we then change over to the poster boy, and someone who also is a bit of an aura master. And it's of course Isagi, who doesn't seem like an aura master right now, as he is breathing super heavily, almost not even being able to stand as he thinks that Otoya is swapping in. We then get a close-up to him and scratch what I said before, because this man is looking for revenge as his eyes look deadly. He then explains that Igo's intent is clear. Otoya and Karasu have tons of combo patterns, which means that he's signaling the team to switch to these Karasu-centric attacks. After that, Isagi looks at the other players and thinks that everyone here understands that they are on track to lose if they keep this up. So even if their defense suffers a bit, their only shot at victory is to double down on offense. But while that is true, it has its side effects, as it also means that Igo doesn't expect him to score any points. And just that thought alone sends Isagi right into his domain expansion as his puzzle pieces start to float around and he looks extremely mad. But not long after he realizes that it's not just him, but Rin as well. He knows that right now, both of them are excluded from the Karasu system to turn this around, and this righteously makes him pretty mad. It then looks like he turns it up a notch as he starts to send radio waves in his domain and also starts to break some of his pieces. Isagi tells us that this is totally Karasu's team now. He knows that he hasn't been able to do anything and wonders if it might be that Igo has actually abandoned him. Even if that's true, he thinks about what he and Rin can do, but still, Isagi isn't even the number one here, as Loki and Hugo are on a whole other level. This makes him feel like there is no way that he can see a way to win, but even though things are so dire, he questions why he is so excited. With that, he looks super ready to go, as he then puts his hand where his heart is and clenches, and this is just a clear sign that our boy is finally back. His eyes then only went so much more intense and fired up as he wondered why he was so freaked out that he was going crazy. But after that, he remembers something crucial. He thinks that he has felt this way since the start of the second half. Ever since he realized just how incredible Hugo really is. Isagi explains that his blood has been boiling and his mind racing. By the way, I like how Kira was added here. He really thinks that he is a part of the team. Anyway, Isagi continues, as he knows that he has felt this excitement lots of times before. It's the feeling of finding someone whom he wants to defeat. After that, it truly clicks for him as his mind goes back up. He wonders if this is really it. He knows that whenever he has done something that surpassed his abilities, it was when there was a clear number one he wanted to surpass. But then, after the Neo-Egoist League, when he ended up as number one, he has been fighting to keep that title. After that, Isagi starts to laugh for himself before saying that it's obvious and that it's unsuitable. By the way, I hate to break it again, but I always wonder what people think when they walk past Isagi on the field, and he is just there laughing for himself. I would be extremely freaked out, and that's for sure. Anyhow, Isagi says that his talents and mindset aren't suited for being number one, and they ended up in this mess because he was trying to force himself. With that, he explains that Hugo's theory is 99% correct, but for that last percent, Hugo has misunderstood Isagi's suitability. With that, Isagi tells us that it's his ego that gets him fired up, and just that line in itself goes off. We then see Ego, who looks at his players, and he tells them not to waver, telling them to live for their own goals until the end. With that, we see Karasu, who starts the game by passing to his side. We then also get 3 small panels of Rin, Shidu, and Baru. But honestly, I feel like Baru won't have much action left in this game. Anyway, back to the ball, which went to Hiyori, and he traps it. After that, he looks up and tells Karasu that this is making him tingly, and tells Karasu not to miss it. With that, he sends the ball over to Karasu, and honestly, it's a really cool pass, like Camus was completely mind-blown. We then get to Karasu, who tells Hiyori that it goes for him as well, and calls him extraordinary. But just then, Bats comes out of nowhere and completely bumps into Karasu. He looks right at him and tells Karasu that he is the crux, thinking that if he can crush him, then they can win. Karasu just starts to smirk towards Bats as he apologizes, but says that he is just an afterimage and tells the shadow clone to go. And this is just pure cinema as we then see the ball, which Karasu already had sent away. It obviously goes to the new sub in Otoya, and this man has a ton of shurikens just spinning all around him. Otoya, however, looks like he just wants to go to bed, but he explains that he is slipping through, and slipping through he sure does as he goes to Gabin and pulls some insane ninja move to get past him. Even Gabin is completely amazed and asks if he is for real now. However, he turns around and tells his team to watch out for a cross. We then see Otoya, who is sprinting up on the field, and Baru tells him to pass it. Rin tells him to come on, and Shidu already thinks that it's going to him, which was pretty funny. But we then move to Karasu, who looks intensely at this as he tells Otoya to not do any of that, but to instead shoot. And that's exactly what he does, as he sends away a killer shot that goes a total of 3 meters before it gets blocked by Loki, who just speeds up to stop it. Seriously, this guy needs to be nerfed. No. But Otoya is super amazed by this as he says that Loki sure is fast. Loki looks pretty unbothered as he then looks at Otoya and tells him that it seems like he is Karasu's auxiliary shadow striker, telling him that he's a pain, but if he can see him, then he can stop him. Just quickly remember that Otoya was able to slip through Chris Prince in the Neo-Egoist League. Does it have any impact here? No, none at all, but I take it up any chance I get. Anyway, we then get back to Karasu, who looks pretty annoyed by this. Meanwhile, we see Hugo, who calls it a good one, and getting praise from both Loki and Hugo isn't bad at all. We then get to Hiyori, who screams out that it's a second ball. He then looks worried as he sees that Hugo's coming back and is heading right to it. But if you thought that the ball would be Hugo's, then I have bad news because the goat has awakened. We see Isagi, who is in his white state, as he is completely bright and super cold, as he has a ton of puzzle pieces around him. He also has his meta vision completely out, and it's even burning with excitement. He then looks right at Hugo and tells him that this was destined and calls him a consultant bastard. But Isagi saying that this was destined was so cold. We then see Hugo, who actually looks pretty amazed and stunned by this, as he just says his name. We then head into Isagi's brain as he thinks that he isn't number one, but he isn't just second best either, explaining that he can only shine when he is devouring the best, and he calls himself a rebel. After that, he explains that this is his utter suitability, which firstly is super dope. But who even cares about that when we have this panel? Like, what is even going on? This is completely insane. And I am so happy to be finally able to say that our boy Isagi is finally back in his prime. Our GOAT, our Lord and Savior, our leader Isagi is finally here. We can see Isagi with the ball while Hugo is to his left. Speaking of Hugo, we get right into his head as he says Isagi's name. He then looks closely at his face and explains that his expression changed. He can sense an immeasurable swell of concentration from him. Hugo then continues as even a bunch of smoke starts to appear behind him. Anyway, he thinks, how in the world did he even manage to intercept the ball just now? He wonders if he determined their attack wouldn't work and tried to get the second ball. Hugo then gets out his metavision eyes and his gears start to spin as he explains that in any case, he is too far to shoot, wondering if he will dribble it up himself or if he will try to make a forward pass to one of those three on the front line. And now an Isagi and Rin link up wouldn't be something that I'm against. After that, Hugo finally gets out of his head and speaks up. He tells Isagi to bring it on, asking him which destiny he will choose, and while Hugo says that, we see Isagi being super fired up and totally absorbed as he first looks dope, but also having his meta vision eyes out. But then right in the next panel, we see Isagi, with no hesitation at all, passing the ball to his right. We see Hugo looking to be extremely shocked by that, and not only him, but also Karasu, who was the one who got the ball. He traps it before just saying Isagi's name with a very strange voice. Isagi, however, looks at him super coldly as he tells him to come on and calls him a fellow second best. We then see Gagamaru using his binoculars all the way from the goal as he also sees this and is super confused and shocked. And not to mention just him, but also Aiku, who asks if he is being for real. Lastly, it's Hiyori, who asks if they are cooperating now, wondering if Isagi is planning to join the Karasu-centric system. And with that, we then see a huge crow starting to get built over Isagi's head with his puzzle pieces. Karasu just seems to get a real smirk as he laughs. He then thinks that the Demon King came down to him. Karasu then decides to flirt a tiny bit with Isagi, as he tells him that he guesses that he can be cute when he wants to, telling Isagi to go and calling him extraordinary second best. With that, we see Karasu passing the ball to Isagi, who we can see Hugo is trying to stop. But Karasu then gets behind Charles, which lets Isagi send the ball right back to him, completely destroying both of them. We even see Charles, who is totally mind-blown, saying that they did a 1-2 pass. We also have Layden, who tells them to hold up as he asks them what's going on. Lastly, it's Gabin who tells them to make an ad-lib defense, explaining that they need to watch out as they are trying to charge up the center. But then we move to Rin, who looks back, and he seems crushed. He says Isagi's name with a worried tone, explaining that he decided coordinating with Rin himself wasn't working, so he switched over to Karasu. This seems to make him furious as his dead eyes start to come out, and we all know that he sure means business when this happens. He then in his head asks how Isagi dares to try and cut Rin. Anyway, with that, we see that there are a mere 2 extra minutes left in this game, and I could swear that in the last chapter, it was 15 minutes left, and I personally feel like it's going a tiny bit fast. Anyhow, we then see Chigiri from the bench. He screams at them all to get up there. It's not only the GOAT Chigiri though, as it's also Bachira who tells them that it's their last chance to score. After them, however, we have Natsuki, who screams with his entire lungs, saying that it's only 2 minutes of added time left on the clock. asking if France's kings will run out the clock, or if maybe, just maybe, Blue Lock Japan's challengers will catch up. After that, we head back to Hugo and Isagi, and they are side by side. Hugo tells Isagi that he has been waiting for this. Isagi just looks at him annoyed as he tells him that he chooses his destiny to be his team's dedicated second best. Hugo then just asks him if he understands now why he has tried so hard to guide him and the Japanese team to their true suitability, explaining that his dream is to win the World Cup 4 times. To that end, France needs to fight against strong rivals to keep leveling up. In other words, they need the world's soccer players to follow their destinies. Then in the next panel, we see Hugo looking completely wild as he is almost entirely in his gear form as he tells Japan that they pass, telling Isagi that now they can reach their true ending. In this showdown between teams of perfect suitability, Isagi just seems to be giving him a mean side-eye, but after that, we see the Blue Lock players completely locking in as we have Karasu, who passes the ball to Hiyori. Hiyori, while holding off Camus, passes the ball to Isagi, who in an instant redirects the pass to Otoya, who just had to go and do something extra with his trap as he jumps up and traps it. After that, he gets back and quickly takes a look around the field before he finds the perfect spot, where Karasu is, and sends him a pass. Karasu then does the same as Otoya did as he quickly takes a good look around the field, trying to find the perfect spot to pass to, and it doesn't take long until he finds Isagi and sends him a pass. Isagi looks to be completely locked in with his meta vision as he then sends the ball back to Karasu. Karasu then traps it with the heel of his foot before taking out his hand to fend off any incoming no-names from France. Hiyori on the side sees this and can only describe this as incredible, thinking that just by Isagi coordinating equally with Karasu, Blue Lock is entering a new dimension. After that, we see Karasu completely going wild as he destroys the France team. After that, he gets an intense stare as he tells the Extraordinary that, here it comes. With that, he seems to send a backheel pass to Hiyori, who, honestly, seems to be pretty shocked by this. He thinks that they are switching now and that the goal is 28 yards away, but he then sees Karasu being right ahead of him, once again shoving away the France players for Hiyori, and seeing this makes him believe that he can shoot. He thinks back and notices that this is the chance to make the same shot as before. However, even then, it's far from it, as this time it's an even better chance. He looks at the field from a higher perspective and says that he can pass to Shidu or even Baru, thinking that there are so many scoring possibilities, ending it by saying that Karasu created this optimal situation. Karasu then looks right at him with the coolest but also creepiest smug expression ever as he tells Hiyori to now come on and choose. Hiyori starts to look fired up as he thinks that he already knows which his best option is, but before he seems to be able to execute any of it, we see Hugo going to Baru and blocking him off, while telling Hiyori not to even think about it, as he can crush Baru. Charles just looks super excited as he goes right to Shidu and explains that he can take care of Shidu. Lastly, it's of course the star boy Loki who comes running. He tells them that they may have more options, but in the end, they are nothing but uncoordinated, egotistical rabble, as he says that we see him closing the distance between himself and Hiyori extremely fast. His eyes then get completely dark and absorbed, and he looks demonic as he explains that if they keep him from making individual goals, then he's utterly screwed. We also see Karasu starting to freak out a bit as he sees Loki approaching. Meanwhile, Hiyori is in a shock state, thinking that with Loki, Hugo, and Charles's individual abilities, one snap judgment was enough to coordinate to shut them down. This makes him wonder just what level these guys are on. However, he then tries to throw those thoughts to the side as he looks at the goal, and he knows that all he can do is shoot. But as he looks closer, he tells himself no, thinking that they're ready for a shot like before. So his course is too narrow. This really makes him freak out as he has no idea just what to do. He then thinks that he took too long to decide as Loki comes right by him. Loki looks super cold as he looks right at Hiyori as he tells him that it's game over. But when all hope was lost, we see Isagi in his white state. He comes on Hiyori's left side and screams out his name, which shocks Hiyori. Isagi screams at him to pass and calls him a major sadist. Hiyori, still just in shock, can only say his name, and we then see Hugo in the last panel as we see him with his meta vision out. Here we see Isagi in his white state mode as he is running like never before. Shidu looks over and is super confused. Meanwhile, Baru is also surprised, but he calls Isagi a loser. However, those two jokers aren't the only ones who are seeing this, as we also have Karasu, who looks towards Isagi and just wonders if this is actually for real, and calls him extraordinary. Lastly, we have Hiyori, who currently is in a battle against Loki since he is in control of the ball. Anyway, we head into his head as he thinks that if he's just going to get crushed by Loki, then take it and calls Isagi an egotist. With that said, Hiyori passes the ball towards Isagi while having Loki trying his hardest to block him and ruin everything for Hiyori. But guys, before moving forward, we have to glaze at this pass. Hiyori is legitimately getting pushed back by Loki, but even then he uses the outside of his foot to send away a pass with this amount of curve. It's just unbelievable. I know that we most of the time glaze at the goals only, but let's give our boy some credit for this. We then cut to Isagi, who is still in his white state, and he has puzzle pieces just going absolutely crazy around him. He then sees the ball coming closer, and he says that it's a nice one, as he then calls Hiyori buddy. Now is it only me, but doesn't it feel a bit strange for Isagi to call someone buddy? I don't think he has ever done that. Most of the time it's partner or something like that. But let's not focus on the wrong things as we then see the ball coming dangerously close to Isagi, and he also has both Shido and Baru ahead of himself. We then move to Renoir, who is looking at this closely. Honestly, we have seen Renoir so much lately, so he is starting to feel like more of a main character than Charles is. Anyway, back on topic. As we see, Renoir is starting to panic mildly as he looks at the pass and explains that it is a perfect pass that opened a shot course up, and with that, he very well knows that the GOAT Isagi is coming. I did like that last part though. It feels like Isagi's name alone is sending chills down their spines. But sadly, it's not going to be just that easy, as we see a bunch of gear pieces spinning around, and we then obviously see Hugo, who asks Isagi if he used everything. Isagi seems to be pretty caught off guard by seeing Hugo here. Hugo, however, starts to look a bit manic as he is just staring down Isagi, explaining that he even joined Karasu's system just to outwit everyone here and to then score his own goal, which is just what a GOAT does, to be fully honest. But Hugo then gets into his head a tiny bit more, even transforming the pitch from grass into gear wheels. Anyway, he asks Isagi if maybe that isn't the case, asking Isagi if maybe he is going to make a pass for his team and lead them to an unimaginable goal as second best. Just then, Hugo really looks absorbed in this new form of his, as he even gets his metavision eyes out. He looks right at Isagi as he tells him to show Hugo that he has chosen a suitable destiny. However, do you and I really think that the hero of Blue Lock, Isagi, is going to go down that path? Well, of course not, as he also gets his metavision eyes out and looks right at Hugo, telling him that it's neither one of those options he put out. Hugo gets really shocked, or rather surprised by that. But Isagi then, in his head, explains that what he wanted more than anything was to crush Hugo in a battle of luck. With that, we see his puzzle pieces going manic around him, as he then changes his direction by now, having both Hugo and the goal behind him, while being faced towards the ball. But that's not all, as he also has a huge puzzle piece, with the words luck battle on it. Hugo, in his head, is super lost, wondering if Isagi is seriously turning around now. He sees the ball approaching Isagi, but wonders what it is that he is thinking, but just then, he sees it. He thinks that there's no question, and that he managed to set up the same reverse shot he made against Nigeria. We then see Isagi, who looks super cold with his hair covering his eyes and having a black background behind him, as he asks Hugo if he didn't say that Blue Lock made it this far on his 1% of luck. Hugo then looks super lost, as he says that Isagi really got him. Right away, we see that the ball is approaching Isagi, who is right in front of Hugo. Hugo behind him thinks that he has no idea whether he will trap and shoot right or left, calling it a perfect 50-50 gamble duel, which is just so sick. But we then get to Isagi, whom we can see is taking a really deep breath before speaking up. He tells Hugo that he keeps talking about suitable destiny, but luck has nothing to do with suitability or talent. With that, we then get the ball yet again, bouncing another step closer. Meanwhile, Isagi starts to look absolutely manic and possessed, as he says that he is making a full bet on his ego and destiny as the guy who devours the best. And right here and now, that's none other than Hugo. Hugo gets chills running down his spine from that, as he seems to be in awe, but also finally realizes just how insane Isagi really is. We also see Shido on the side, who can't help but look absolutely ecstatic as he sees this and even starts to laugh. We also see Baru, who seems to be annoyed by this, but I do think that he is a bit greedy here, as he already has one goal. But we can't forget about the crow Karasu, who, no joke, looks scared for his life as he calls Isagi nuts, which to be honest is spot on. But sadly, we then get to Hugo, who doesn't seem to budge by just this, as he gets out his metavision eyes and tells Isagi, fine. We then get this insane looking panel with a bunch of puzzle pieces, but also gear pieces being around them, as Hugo thinks that he respects that rebellious spirit, and that he also accepts Isagi's duel of luck, which, I mean, there isn't anything else that he could do. So he has no choice either way, but I get what he means. Anyway, we continue to be in Hugo's thoughts as he thinks that if he waits until Isagi traps it to react, then it will already be too late. On top of that, tricks or cleverness won't work. Because of that, he has to bet it right now on either right or left. With that, we see both Isagi and Hugo getting more and more infused with their auras and looking totally absorbed, as Hugo says that it's a total gamble of destiny. With that said, we see the big puzzle pieces with the word luck on them. We see it finally hitting the ground, and both Hugo and Isagi is getting ready to just completely bet it all on this very play, as we then see Isagi's foot getting closer to the ball. And then, in the next panel, I almost can't believe it as we see Hugo stepping to Isagi's right side. Meanwhile, Isagi decided to step to his left side, and having the ball just soaring in the air currently, Hugo looks back, and he seems to be completely filled with despair as he says that Isagi went left, and that he was wrong. Isagi then hits Hugo with the nastiest spin ever, that would even make the ninjas from Ninjago proud, and while he is here just aura farming, he decides to go even further, as he looks right at Hugo, and has no fear, as he tells him straight up that he won, and for Hugo to bow to his luck. And if I were Hugo here and someone telling me to bow to their luck, I know for a fact that I would lose my all here. And we kind of see that happening to Hugo, as it seems to get dark around him, as he then explains that his precious destiny it lost after all. But just then, when we are at the most critical point ever, we then see a Rin filled with total rage, and having his tongue going left and right, we see him coming at the ball at an insane speed. We then get a close-up to his face where we see that he is really looking manic, and he asks Isagi if he thought that he could escape, telling him that he doesn't have the right to leave Rin behind, which seems a bit psychopathic, but it's Rin, so what do we expect? We then see Isagi, who seems to be completely stunned by this, as he looks super shocked, and it's not only him, but also Hugo, as none of them can even start to understand why Rin would be here. But Rin then just starts to get more and more intense as he gets his predator eyes out, and tells Isagi with no hesitation that he is going to obliterate him. Isagi, however, isn't going to take that, and far from it, as he tells Rin to just be silent and calls him a freak. And as Rin is having his tongue out, I must admit that he really looks like a freak, so you can't even argue that Isagi is wrong by saying that. But we then see that both of them get side by side, and the two of them at the same time says that this is their goal. But that's not the only thing that they do at the same time, as I can't believe my eyes. But we also see them as they shoot the ball at the goal at the exact same time. Yeah, you heard that right. Both Rin and Isagi is firing the ball together right at the goal at the most critical moment of the match, and both of them being certain that they are the ones who are getting the goal. Here we see Rin, who looks demonic and has his tongue out and ready. We then see him and Isagi, both of them jumping up into the air to then meet with the ball, and this looks sick. Anyway, after that we see Isagi, who looks to be pretty annoyed and shocked by this, and I can't really blame him because why would Rin be here after all? After that I feel like we got blessed by the heavens or something, because this panel has to be like the top 5 blue lock panels ever. We see Isagi having his puzzle pieces just floating around him, while on Rin's side he has his rage aura around himself, and then both of them stare right at the ball as they then together shoot it away. We even get a close-up panel of the ball where it looks like the sheer force of their combined shot. It even starts to make lightning bolts appear around it. Then as we move to the next panel, we see the ball being sent away in a nanosecond. Both Baru and Shidu, who is on the side of the ball, they look completely stunned by the sheer force of it, and we then follow the ball as it goes closer and closer towards the goal. We see Renoir jumping and trying to get his hand towards the ball, but magically it doesn't matter as the ball goes right past him, and he looks destroyed. But sadly it doesn't end there. It doesn't end with Rin and Isagi saving the day together and getting their combined goal, because of course it doesn't. Instead, we see the ball hitting the crossbar and bouncing away. This leaves Isagi and Rin looking completely stunned, as I can imagine that they are visualizing their hopes and dreams being absolutely crushed, and that they are slowly but surely falling into despair. Just a random thought, however, in this panel, they really look like brothers. Like, the resemblance is crazy. If someone told me that they were brothers, then I would believe it. Anyway, enough with my yapping. As we continue to see the soaring ball, we also see Karasu, Shidu, and Baru just looking at this super lost and stunned. But someone who is taking this chance into action is none other than Loki, who we can see is running with all that he can, turning into a straight-up Ferrari as he is speeding down the field. We see Kunigami, who tried his best to jump up and to meet with the ball, but none of that mattered when he was up against Loki, who just zoomed past him with ease, making Kunigami look extra annoyed. Then, as Loki has the ball, he suddenly decides to aura farm like crazy as he stops a bit, and it looks like he is almost sliding onto the field and grabbing the grass. But while he looks extremely cool, he then tells Blue Lock goodbye, and as he says that, we can see his eye starting to change from light-hearted fun to extremely locked in and meaning business. As then, in the following panel, we see him going past both Otoya as well as Aryu, and none of them seems to even be able to grasp what it is that is going on as they just got blitzed out of nowhere. We then move to Isagi, who looks really lost before he then turns that lost-looking expression into anger as he is mad. He takes a deep breath while looking at Hugo, who is running ahead of him. He then explains in his head that Hugo fell into a battle of luck, and he managed to beat Hugo in a one-on-one, and yet, Rin showed up at the last second and messed up his shot's impact. While he says that, we also see a small panel of Rin, as he also looks pretty annoyed and mad. Anyway, back to Isagi, who thinks that if Rin hadn't been there, it would have been his goal, but as he says that, he suddenly remembers Igo's words. He remembers seeing Igo telling them that they are all strikers and to keep trying for their own goals until the very last second. This really shocks Isagi as he starts to question everything. He looks at Loki, who is currently just obliterating the blue lock side, and thinks that, according to the philosophy that Igo talked about, Rin was correct in trying to score a goal, but if that ends up being why they lose, then Igo's theory as well as blue lock itself might have all failed. Anyway, as Isagi says that, and is absorbed in his own head, it's getting real out on the pitch as we sadly see Loki completely embarrassing Aiku before Loki then sent a shot right into the goal, which not even Japan's guardian Gagamaru could save as it went straight past him. With that, Loki managed to score a goal, making it a 2-goal lead. We then see the commentator screaming out that it's a goal. As he screams that, we see the France crowd not being able to contain their excitement as they scream out with all that they can. The commentator continues and says that Loki broke past 6 players in a mega counter to score a 4th point for France's Kings. But sadly, we then see the Japanese crowd and they looks to be absolutely heartbroken. And just then, while they are filled with despair, it only gets worse as the referee then decides to blow his whistle. The commentator says that he doesn't believe it. And now that was the pitiless game-ending whistle, explaining that surpassing all of Blue Lock's strikers, is there anyone closer to being the world's best than Loki the Prodigy, with a score of 2-4 in Japan versus France? Blue Lock Japan has lost. We then see Henri being super shocked and just overall confused by this. Meanwhile, Igo just has a stone face like most of the time, and he doesn't give us any expression at all. But we then get over to Loki, who we can see is yawning right after scoring his goal, and he even calls it boring. He breathes out and starts to walk away while saying that he is glad that it's over, saying that he guesses that the popular Blue Lock wasn't all it's cracked up to be. But he does admit that it did get a little tingly, which coming from Loki is better than nothing. We then have Hugo, who is silently walking behind him. He then speaks up and agrees with Loki, saying that as a team full of strikers, they refuted their own philosophy and failed. Hugo looks over the Blue Lock's players and explains that a group of egotists whose destiny is to never reach the World Cup, and more suitably to scatter to the winds with their objective unfulfilled. Hugo starts to look serious as he tells Blue Lock so long and that they were cogs in his destiny and that they won't meet again. But just as he says that, someone tells him to be for real. It's Isagi who is behind him. He tells Hugo that his luck obliterated his precious theory, telling Hugo that even him himself knows it, saying that it wasn't just Blue Lock that failed, but his suitable destiny theory is full of shit too, he continues, and says that Hugo talks about humanity's legends or winning the World Cup 4 times. After that, we see a super fired up and wild looking Isagi as he tells Hugo not to run from his destiny and that he lost to Isagi, calling him a second best bastard. Now say whatever you want about Isagi losing and still talking shit, but you can't deny that this is so cold. This is exactly why I love Isagi, as he really put Hugo in his place right now, and he has so much aura. Hugo then looks back at Isagi and look at this. Hugo actually has a smile on his face. Like, I can't even believe it. I don't think that we have ever seen Hugo with a smile so far, so this feels actually super weird. Anyway, he tells Isagi that he is a real pain, and he then tells him until next time and calls him an egotist. Now at the start of the match, I didn't think that I would love the rivalry between Isagi and Hugo that much, but right here and now, I'm completely sold on it.